phenomenon a lot of us have observed where the smaller something is, the more aggressive it tends to be. At least in two cases that I can think of, like with dogs. Like, small dogs oftentimes go ballistic, like Donnie from the Wild Thornberries, and just like trying to attack bigger animals or like get really loud, like Chihuahuas are notorious for it. But we can observe that same behavior in small men. Short man syndrome. I think probably the best example of that is Bagel Boss. I know that's a deep cut at this point because it happened quite a few years ago. That's like referencing season 1 of the internet at this point with how fast things move. But I think a lot of you remember the Bagel Boss where he freaked out, it started going crazy and reckless all because he thought someone was making fun of his height. And short man syndrome is something that's been discussed quite a bit. As a short man, I can tell you with confidence, it's not all of us. We don't all have that trait. But the reason I bring that up is because of a body cam I watched today where someone who had no right talking the shit they were talking tried it on an officer and they got a big attitude adjustment.
What's up, man?
What's up?
What's up?
What's up?
What car you in?
I ain't in any of these cars.
Let's go. Then you gotta get out. Let's go.
Nah, I don't gotta go nowhere.
You live here?
I don't got. Yeah, I live here. You don't got.
Okay, what's
what
your
you walking
address?
up on me like that for? What's up?
What's your address?
Take that vest off. Come on.
Take that vest off for me.
Come on. Take that vest off. Come on. Take that shit off. Let's get it.
All right,
Let's
yeah,
get it, bro. What's up? What's up?
Do me a favor,
Take that
man.
shit off. Take that shit off. You laughing like you're not a bitch.
Do me a favor.
Like
sit
you're
down.
not a bitch.
Stop
Take
bumping
that shit
your
off.
This guy is not looking like a fighter. He looks like when you set the slider as far to the left on slim as you can during the Oblivion character creator. He is as skinny as my wiener. He's got the body of like 3 french fries loosely held together. He's built like a cigarette. Yet he's out here talking and immediately sounds like looking to throw hands with the officer, telling him to take the vest off, telling him, let's go, bitch. Like, he's talking reckless right now. He thought he was still on Summoner's Rift right here talking to faceless teammates in League of Legends, but it doesn't really work like that here.
Come on. Nah, take that shit off. Let's get it.
Where do you live?
Your partner here like he's gonna do something. You ain't gonna do shit.
Where do you live, man?
I live right here. There ain't nothing about
What's
it.
your address?
Do something about it.
Huh?
How about that? Take your shit off and do something about it. I won't.
Like you what? Like you want what?
Honestly, the officer was pretty patient here. He's kind of treating it like a joke up till this point. He even looks at the other officer like, can you believe this shit? Because look at the difference here. The officer has like 6 inches on him maybe, and at least like 60 pounds. Like, it wouldn't be a fight. That would be a slaughter. Plus, the douchebag has a huge debuff because his TikTok broccoli hair is in his eyes. I don't even think he can clearly see the officer right now. But he's trying to put on this big song and dance for his friends that he's like some, colossal tough guy here, and it is just shameful.
I ain't gonna say nothing on that camera.
What
So
do you
I'm
gotta
saying,
do?
take
What do
that
you
off.
gotta do? What do you
Take
do?
it off. Let me see.
Okay, take it out. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me get your ID.
You ain't gonna get shit.
Okay.
Take it off and you'll see. Well, what you laughing for? I'm writing your shit. Take it off.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. I'm a minor.
It was an interesting strategy post-takedown where he tried to tell the officer he's a minor. He's 20 years old. But that technique right there is actually something I've theory crafted on if I was to ever be in like a dire situation. Like, let's say someone's got me cornered and they're looking to do harm. I have toyed with the notion of trying to say like, stop, please don't, I'm only 12. Now, it'd be a hard sell in my case because of the tattoos and the beard, but I have the height of a 12-year-old, so I do think there is a chance. But in this case, when he said that, I really did think, oh, he actually might just be a kid, but he's not. He's 20 years old. So he was really just desperately trying to go into like the bag of tricks to try anything to wiggle his way out of this one. It didn't work. Also, I love the line that he gave right before he got the, the fucking pile driver there. He said, I'm up in your shit, which is very reminiscent of one of my favorite lines in a Freakout where a cyclist went up to a guy, like a really creepy guy who was filming a woman's ass, and he was like blocking the camera, and he said, and I'll never forget, doesn't matter who the fuck I am, I'm up in your shit, so what the fuck? It had that same DNA. And I really appreciate that. While I might not like this guy's attitude here about talking all tough about how he's going to like throw down with this officer who would absolutely eat him, break him in half like a Kit Kat bar, I do like that he tried that line.
So why'd you get in my face? What, you gonna hit me?
No, sir.
Huh?
No, sir.
So why'd you get in my face then? I told you stop balling up your fist, right?
I did.
Okay, so why'd you get in my face? All right, stand up.
Not me too, sir.
Hey, you doing the head? Back up. Hey, back up.
Back up, back up.
You doing the head? Back up.
Right now.
The you doing, bro?
Back up. It's no big deal.
Player 2 just plugged in the controller and he's about to put on quite a show here watching his brother get arrested. Now, you'll love to see how quickly his tune changed after being taken down. He went from like, take that vest off, let's see it, bitch. Let me see what you're made of, bitch. Like, what's going on with that? Come on, man. Like, take the vest off. I'm not gonna say it on camera, bitch. And now he's on the ground. He's like, sir, I'm so sorry. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. Sir, I'm so sorry. Like, he's now just trying, like, to be respectful as if he wasn't just actually 2 seconds ago talking some reckless shit.
Hell, where you going? Nah, bro. It's all good. I ain't doing nothing. No, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
Sit down.
Joey! It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
Joey, bro.
I ain't do nothing.
I'm not helping. Joey!
It ain't nothing.
You let the man go to jail!
Oh my god, those voice cracks. The actual fucking, like, bird screeching of his yelling. Like the kind of shit that you hear in Gamer Rage compilations where they get, like, excited and then the voice breaks. Actual puberty shit here. But I'm pretty sure he's also, like, the same age as his brother.
I didn't have time to work on him.
I didn't do nothing, bro.
You were about to hit me, dude.
I was not about to.
So why'd you ball your fist and get in my face?
Because, dude, you're running up on me, bro.
Yeah,
Like,
okay, okay.
I'm sorry. I was just hyped up, truthfully.
Hey, you a bitch, stand over there right now. You's a bitch, bro. You bitch me, bro. You bitch me.
So I watched it back a couple times. The guy was balling up his fists a few times, and then right before the takedown, he does get, like, right up in that man's shit. Like, he was all up in there like he was fucking pooping the colon. So, like, he does get close. The officer may have perceived that as, like, it's about to get aggressive, so he just immediately put the kibosh on that, ragdolling this goober. I also love how the brother has almost the same attitude and the same, like, NPC dialogue lines where he just keeps calling him, like, a bitch. Like, it's incredible how similar they are. Like, they're wearing the same shirt, too, I'm almost positive.
I told you several chances. I said, hey, stop balling your fist. Chill out.
I apologize.
All right, I accept your apology, but
Seriously.
we didn't have to take it to this level, man.
I know. I'm sorry. I was just hyped up.
It's like 15 of you guys gonna let you punch me in the face. What do you think I am? I'll punch you back? Well, you look like you were gonna hit me.
I know, and I apologize. Swear to God,
All right, why'd you what's all the balling up your fist?
Sorry, sir. I'm just hyped up. That's all. There's a situation going on, sir. Honestly, I apologize.
He's now de-aggroed the douchebag here, so now he's all apologetic. Look, I was just hyped up, you know? I was kind of feeling myself. I'm sorry. You like walked up on me and I thought it was time to start, you know, doing some of this at you. Like, I don't know. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like, that's his new, like, go-to line now. And it doesn't really help him out that much.
No, you screwed up. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. I was acting big and tough. I f***ed up. I got.
That's for the juvenile assessment center, correct? What's going to happen is he's going to get taken down there. They're going to process him, and then.
Why juvenile?
How old is he?
20.
He's 20 years old. Someone over there said he was 16. If he's 20, then he's going down to county jail.
That's good.
All right.
Now that he's had his whole come to Jesus moment, he just keeps profusely apologizing, like, oh, I don't know what came over me, officer. I was acting all big and tough. It's ridiculous. I feel so silly. I feel so ashamed. I'm sorry. And he keeps, like, going down that path. It doesn't stop him from getting arrested, but everything cools down between him and the officers. And then they talk to the father here. And by the way, the father is, like, the sole reason his brother also didn't get into some trouble here. Like, the father was able to, like, get his brother inside and try and, like, calm everything down. And now they're talking to the dad, saying, like, he's going to be going to, like, the juvenile holding facility or whatever. And the dad's like, juvenile, what? He's 20. So they're like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, he's just going to jail.
About 2 feet.
Just hooting and hollering and yelling and screaming?
Yeah, just talking shit. That's all.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I regret it. Trust me, I regret it.
All right.
Sure, you know.
So he did get charged with assaulting a police officer as well as concealing a weapon, brass knuckles. I don't know where he was hiding that on his person there. He must have had that in his prison wallet, because he did get patted down, and I guess they just missed the brass knuckles, so that got slapped on there. I don't really know about that assaulting an officer charge, because he didn't do that, except for maybe like Sonic-based attacks from his brother's voice-cracking screeches. Maybe like the wailing from his brother you could take as like an assault on the senses, but this guy didn't really do that. He got stopped before it ever got to that point. So I don't really know how that charge works in this case, but regardless, that's what he was facing. This was back in like 2022, so it's a few years old now, but I still wanted to share this because I just found that to be so interesting to see. That's really about it. So yeah.
At Vodafone, spring into the future.
With tracking down weird video. You know, in the 80s, I was obsessed with tracking down weird videos. Just weird videos and weird films we had seen. And one of the films that came to me was a movie called Guinea Pig. And I promptly made a copy of it, and the FBI said, "You need to hand over the original tape."
That is Chris Gore, and the tape he's talking about contained a copy of a Japanese horror film from 1985. Back then, as the founder of the infamous Film Thread magazine, he was always on the lookout for the most obscure movies he could possibly find. And the way to do that was to tap into the somewhat underground world of VHS tape trading.
We were trading tapes with so many people, and then the thing was they would send me their weird tapes. That's how we did all of this.
Those tapes would often contain unauthorized copies of movies from all around the world that were either extremely difficult to find or straight up banned in some countries. The kind of stuff you couldn't just find in your local Blockbuster. And while the majority of the movies were just strange or bizarre, one of them felt different. There was no music, no more than a basic title graphic, and not even the standard practice of opening credits. It almost felt like someone's private home video of a man observing strangers in front of a train station in Tokyo until he eventually sees a young lady and proceeds to stalk her, slowly driving his car behind her, and as soon as they get far away from the busy streets of the city, he chases her down and abducts her. The rest of the movie takes place in some creepy makeshift slaughterhouse, and since I cannot possibly show you what happens next, instead, I'll give you some context with, let's just say, dramatic reenactment. Yeah, all of that happens, and it is shown in great detail with very intricate close-ups right in your face. The point is, it looked real, so much so that people weren't entirely sure if it was actually fiction or something far more sinister. And one of those people was no other than the actor Charlie Sheen. There are a few different accounts of exactly how it happened, but what we know for a fact is that Charlie Sheen saw this movie, and because of him, the FBI got involved.
Well, what happened was they took it very seriously. I had all these videos confiscated. I had to be interviewed by the FBI about this video and where I obtained it. The guy who gave me the video got, investigated, and it was weird. All I did was just make a copy of a tape and give it to Charlie Sheen.
They weren't the only ones either. Around the same time, a lawyer in Sweden had found that exact same movie and had also reported it to the police. And over in Britain, a man entering the country with a copy of it had gotten arrested and taken to court because of its possession. Clearly, everyone took this extremely seriously, and Looking back at it now, you might think it's a little bit silly, right? I mean, supposedly it's just a movie. But the thing is that those concerns were not entirely unwarranted. In his 1971 book about Charles Manson, author Ed Sanders included an interview with a member of his cult who claimed that they had once videotaped a murder they've committed. It is one of the first uses of the term snuff film, or basically a movie which shows real violence. And while no such video involving Charles Manson had ever been found, the urban legends began to spread. With consumer cameras becoming more widely available back in the 70s, people began to speculate that the possibility of someone capturing the real stuff was constantly increasing. And in 1976, after reading an article about it, a marketing-savvy film producer took advantage. He filmed a completely new ending to an unreleased low-budget movie he had the rights to, and in order to promote it, he hired fake protesters to demonstrate against it in theaters and even reported it to the police himself. As soon as they saw it, people could easily tell it wasn't real, but it did make a profit, and more importantly, it brought the idea of snuff into the mainstream. Now, that one was clearly a hoax, but many of the other films that followed continued to push the limits and blur the lines. In 1978, a pseudo-documentary called Faces of Death had featured a bunch of different ways to die. And while the majority of those were achieved with practical effects and makeup, there were some real ones too, that the filmmakers had taken from news archives and old war footage. Although it got banned in a number of countries and heavily censored, it grossed over $35 million, and in some cases, it showed people real death on the big screen.
The end of the beginning or the beginning of the end? I'll leave that decision to you.
Real gore and extreme graphic images were becoming a big debate in society, but the ethics of it were not necessarily the main concern for the authorities. For them, it was crucial to know about how that footage was obtained, because going back to Guinea Pig, the movie that Charlie Sheen had reported, it didn't just show a natural disaster or unfortunate accident, but a very premeditated and vicious crime.
Charlie was so shocked upon watching this film. He was so taken aback, he thought he had witnessed an actual murder.
By the time the FBI got involved, they quickly found out that the authorities in Japan had also investigated, because a few years after its release, it got connected to a murder case that had completely shaken the country. In the late 80s, a 27-year-old man had taken the lives of 4 young girls in Tokyo in a way that I don't even want to describe. The police had found almost 6,000 videotapes in his room, and among the many slasher and snuff films was Guinea Pig. Because of how brutal his crimes were, there was a huge public outrage, and many blamed this kind of movies for encouraging and inspiring him, and as a result, the movie was taken off the shelves. So with all the controversies surrounding it and multiple investigations from all around the world, the main question remains: was it snuff or fiction?
All this hellish, unhealthy, violent activity, our kids are seeing this and thinking it's normal.
To find the answer, we need to go back to 1985. Around that time in Japan, the straight-to-video market had experienced a rapid growth. As a result of the increased popularity of VHS tapes that people could just play directly, smaller filmmakers were able to produce low-budget movies with almost no censorship and significantly less restrictions compared to theatrical releases. That allowed directors to push the boundaries a lot, and considering that horror as a genre was already huge in Japan, they certainly did. So, inspired by all this, a young producer would set on to create something that would push the envelope even further. And just like that, the Guinea Pig series was born. The first one, Devil's Experiment, he directed himself, and a text in the beginning claimed that it is a real found footage. There were no credits, no title, and nothing that would break the illusion. All that was shown was basically someone being tortured for 40 minutes straight, and the whole shtick about it being authentic worked. The movie did really well on the VHS rental market, so naturally it was time for part 2, the one that Charlie Sheen had seen, Flower of Flesh and Blood. For this one, however, he got the help of the prominent manga artist Hideshi Hino. Sometimes referred to as the king of horror manga, Hideshi Hino had built a reputation for his deeply unsettling, grotesque, and borderline terrifying images. This was going to be his very first movie as a director, an entirely new creative medium to him that he wanted to bring a certain level of artistry to. He wanted to elevate it, so instead of it just being straight up gore, he incorporated a tiny bit of narrative. Something that might have gotten lost in translation, because in the very beginning, he lays out the premise that a crazy fan of his horror manga had gotten inspired from it and committed this heinous crime, and had sent him a package with photos, videos, and a letter describing it in great detail. But it was so graphic that he couldn't show it to us, so instead, what we're seeing is his own artistic interpretation. You can feel that there is a style in some of the editing, the colors, the cinematography, and even down to the over-the-top sound effects.
その後に何か見た人がだからただそれだけじゃないそれから先のね何かをこうイマジネーションしてくれれば面白いんじゃないかなと思うんですけどね。
As opposed to everyone else, Hideshi Hino had never claimed that what was shown was real, but he had done such a good job at making it look convincing that to some people, it was. A year later, the filmmakers released some behind-the-scenes footage and showed exactly how it was done. They've experimented with different techniques, materials, wire work, practical effects, and have created over 50 different body parts until they got it just right. It is genuinely a really good showcase of practical effects, if you're into that kind of stuff, of course. The backlash surrounding it, though, had permanent consequences. In a 2009 interview with Vice, Hideshi Hino shared that because of everything that had happened, the production of his first feature film got cancelled, and it also affected his work as an artist. After talking to the police, he also claimed that what they had found in the serial killer's collection was not his, but a later installment in the Guinea Pig series. In the same interview with Vice, Hideshi Hino recalls a time in which a journalist asked a film critic if this sort of video is really necessary in the world, to which he replied, no, absolutely not. And it got me thinking. As I was researching the story, I kept asking myself, what is it exactly that draws us into this kind of extreme horror? On one hand, you have people who are very much against it, because they argue that it could give us the wrong ideas, and there are some cases that support that claim. Remember Faces of Death, the pseudo-documentary that showed people dying? Well, in 1986, a 14-year-old boy killed his classmate and claimed that he got the idea for it precisely because he saw that movie. Whether that is an isolated case or a real issue, I'm not smart enough to say. I'm sure someone will have a better answer than me.
We don't know the extent to which exposure to this kind of material results in actual violent behavior. What we do know is that exposure to this kind of material results in a more calloused person, a less sensitive person.
And on the other hand, people can argue that it's morbid curiosity.
They know it's entertainment, they know it's special effects, they get together, they have little parties, they watch these movies, they have a good time. I don't think they're really seeing the undercurrents that a lot of paranoid parents are seeing. If the world be a better place because there weren't horror films, there weren't explicit stalk and slash films, and the world would be at peace, well then burn all the negatives of every horror film ever made, if that's going to be kind of a guarantee, but it isn't.
It is us facing our own mortality, and to bring it full circle, here's a quote from Film Threat, the magazine from the beginning that sort of started this whole story, which says that it somehow makes us feel alive. We like feeling alive, and we like to feel like we're cheating death by watching movies like that.
Hey, what's up guys, Riff here. So today we're going to be talking about some big VTuber related drama involving one of the largest indie VTubers on the scene.
Have you seen the God Save Birmingham gameplay trailer? Seems cool, but it's giving off fake game vibes like the day before. God Save Birmingham. Have I seen that one? Oh, this is the trailer that dropped like 5 hours ago. Yeah, I haven't watched this whole thing. We'll watch it. We'll check it out. It is a farmer versus zombie gameplay, or zombie. Okay, I can't read. Farmer versus zombie game set in medieval Birmingham, England. So you play as like a farmer peasant fighting infected zombie peasants. Interesting. Let's see it. Let's see it. This is apparently a zombie game set in Birmingham, England, 1359. Are you sure this is set in 30? It looks pretty similar to how it does today. Realistic zombie survival with deadly physics. Quite. That's a lot of zombies, isn't it? Dude, British jokes will never not be funny in this chat. I do declare it. Looting. So one of the things Real Serious said was, seems cool, but it's giving off fake game vibes like the day before. It's... Oh, I feel you, bro. That's how it feels making YouTube videos sometimes. Just... I mean, so far it looks doable. It looks very doable. I'm not familiar with the studio. Who's doing it? So far it looks doable, but this feels like one of those games that could get like a massive visual downgrade at launch, you know? Ooh. It's a big boy. A bigger meatball. Ooh. Oh! Jesus Christ.
Damn thing.
So this is one of those games that might actually be like difficult to cover on YouTube, because Dead Island 2 with the gore system, you couldn't post videos of that and like without YouTube flagging your video and everything. This is probably going to be on that level. But I mean, so far I'm not seeing anything that's like crazy unachievable. Usually crowd density will plummet in these games close to launch. But like seeing some stuff that isn't like ideal. If it was totally fake, I think you wouldn't see the same zombie model copied multiple times, because I think that that would be like, if you're gonna fake it all the way so it looks amazing, you know, don't repeat models and stuff. But the fact they're using repeated models to me is actually encouraging, because it shows that it's probably real, you know. But it's interesting. It's interesting. 8 minutes of the trailer. Let's see, but is it a new studio? Ocean Drive. They made Veil of the Witch, which very positive. Section 13, mostly positive. So they've done some stuff. I don't think I've heard of these, but they've made games before. They're not total noobs or anything. Interesting. Interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. It doesn't look bad. It's the gameplay, you know, looks a little slower, but it looks like it's going to be coming to early access specifically, and they'll keep developing it through early access. Not my favorite. I'm glad that they can at least get some cash up front to keep finishing it, but I usually jump into games once they hit 1.0. Just my policy typically.
Are they getting rid of them? What the hell is this? 'Cause
This is the story of three Polish friends who quit their jobs to create a horror video game. Even though the genre terrifies them, they had no experience in game development and no backup plan if things didn't work out. Yet after 4 years of non-stop work and multiple nervous breakdowns, they crafted one of the most unsettling and terrifying games ever made, Darkwood. But how exactly did they pull it off? And why did they decide to take an indefinite break from making games after releasing Darkwood? Let's find out. Artur Kordas, Gustav Stagachevski, and Jakub Kuch first met in college and quickly became friends. They all shared a curious trait: none of them enjoyed anything related to horror. The feeling of fear was simply not something they enjoyed. Years later, after graduating and finding jobs in the animation and graphic design industry, they reconnected to discuss making a video game in their spare time. Around the end of 2012, with no prior experience in game development, they began work on a small tower defense game inspired by the Amiga title Home Alone. The concept was straightforward. Players would protect the home base at night from monsters and rebuild it during the day. Arthur, Gustav, and Jakub believed they could finish it in about a month. Meanwhile, hoping to gain more experience, they attended a global game jam in January 2013. The theme was Heartbeat, and in just 48 hours, the three developers made a game about Kevin Costner eating bull hearts, inspired by Dances with Wolves. Their entry won the game jam and caught the attention of media outlets like Kotaku. Seizing the opportunity, they established a name for their studio, Azure Wizard Studio, and settled on a title for their tower defense project, Darkwood. This way, any coverage of their Game Jam entry would also mention Darkwood. After a successful Game Jam, the team returned to their main project with renewed confidence and motivation. That being said, they were aware of their limitations as a small team, so they went with a top-down perspective because it was quicker and easier to implement. As they experimented with mechanics such as a limited field of view, dynamic lighting, and intense sound design, they saw the potential for a horror game that, despite their own fears, was exactly the type of horror experience they had always wanted to play. One that avoids cheap jump scares in favor of building a tense, unnerving atmosphere. Early ideas of a semi-open world, crafting and skill systems, stealth and combat, and branching storylines that could influence the game world soon took shape. In response, the three friends decided to transform their initial tower defense concept into a fully fledged roguelike survival horror experience. Despite their fear of the genre, they were always fascinated by the core themes and elements it offered. The blurry line between reality and nightmares, unsettling visions, hidden and inexpressible evil, alienation, and loneliness. These ideas fueled their imaginations and led to a game concept focused on exploring a terrifying forest, without relying on jump scares. When they began work on Darkwood, the dominant trend in horror films and games was to use jump scares to evoke fear. While the team agrees these can be effective and entertaining, they also find them shallow when overused. To them, a horror experience that engages the imagination and leaves room for the mind to fill in the blanks is far more compelling. If you, just like Arthur, Gustav, and Jakob, want to make games or develop other types of digital experiences, I highly recommend checking out Boot.dev, which is this video's sponsor. Boot.dev is an online platform that has turned learning how to code into a fun and captivating RPG experience. They provide courses for the programming languages Python, Go, SQL, and others so that you can learn backend development from start to finish. The platform is designed to make sure you'll be writing a ton of code, as the people at Boot.dev believe the best way to learn to program is by getting your hands on the keyboard and completing projects. All the while, you'll be earning XP, levels, and achievements by completing quests. Not everyone has the means to pay for a membership, so all of their content is free to read and watch in guest mode. A paid membership unlocks the game and all the interactive components that go with it. The whole reason why Boot.dev is so engaging and efficient at teaching you how to code. Furthermore, the Boot.dev Discord community is very active and there to help if you ever get stuck on your coding challenges. Go to Boot.dev and try out the courses for free. Then use my code ThatGuyGlenn to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Boot.dev, learn backend development the smart way. Now back to the video. The three developers were eager to add their own individual ideas and influences, which helped shape the grand vision for Darkwood. In an interview, Gustav mentioned that the game's tone and atmosphere drew heavily from the works of Andrei Tarkovsky, Stanley Kubrick, and David Lynch, especially Twin Peaks and The Shining. Meanwhile, the game's story was inspired by authors such as Stanislav Lem and the Strugatsky brothers. Making great work is often the result of dealing with your own self, your fears, dreams, or events in your life that had a profound effect on you. Many great horror authors have lived troubled lives or experienced traumatic events. Stephen King witnessed the tragic death of his childhood friend. Stanislav Lem saw many atrocities done by other human beings during and after World War II. Their work is often the result of trying to cope with those experiences. So dig deep into the darkest corners of your mind and confront your demons. Forge them into a story or experience that only you can tell. When it came to gameplay, the team was inspired by Dark Souls. Arthur had always been fascinated by how From Software combined game mechanics with straightforward audiovisual elements to create an atmosphere of desolation, sadness, mystery, and ever-lurking danger. He also admires how Souls games avoid spoon-feeding information to players, instead encouraging them to learn through discovery. Meanwhile, the grim atmosphere and dark humor of the first two Fallout games, along with meaningful choices that have lasting consequences, influenced the team's approach to storytelling in Darkwood. The Polish team also drew inspiration from real-life experiences. Both Gustav and Arthur suffer from hallucinations when they wake up during the night, causing them to see bizarre, almost surreal things. According to Gustav, it was pretty easy to channel these experiences into the emotions they wanted the player to feel. Once all three developers had shared their ideas and influences, they set out to combine them into a cohesive vision. However, their lack of experience meant they vastly underestimated the difficulty of weaving these various elements together, something that would eventually lead to many sleepless nights. The fear of the unknown and using the player's imagination against them were core design principles. As a result, the developers invested significant effort in creating a procedurally generated forest, ensuring each playthrough felt unfamiliar and kept players on edge. Major locations were still handcrafted, but to further emphasize the fear of the unknown, some areas would change drastically based on the player's decisions throughout the branching storylines. Speaking of locations, the team decided to set Darkwood in Poland, where they were born and raised. This choice felt natural as it allowed them to craft a more genuine and convincing narrative. It also served as a way to introduce players to Polish folklore, which they hoped would feel both exotic and refreshing to most players. The protagonist had to match the game's unsettling and mysterious atmosphere, so a typical hero was off the table. Even in the earliest stages of development, the team envisioned a voiceless, strange outsider with distorted, repulsive features. An anti-hero who would provoke resentment among the forest inhabitants while instilling alienation and dread in the player. When developing the game's overall look and feel, the team chose to keep the pixelated art style from their tower defense prototype, along with the top-down perspective to simplify asset production and animations. Although they considered the graphics and distant camera to be the game's weakest points, they leveraged these limitations to their advantage. Because the pixelated graphics make it harder to identify characters, enemies, and objects, players have to rely more on their imagination, allowing the developers to play tricks on the player's imagination. The game was built in Unity, and all the code was written in C#. In March 2013, after fleshing out core combat and survival mechanics, the Polish developers created a vertical slice of Darkwood and posted a gameplay trailer on their YouTube channel. The trailer caught the attention of the press and received far more positive reactions than they ever anticipated. Realizing they might be able to make a living from game development, they spent the next 2 months preparing an Indiegogo campaign to help fund Darkwood. To introduce the game to the world, they even produced a silly video explaining why they needed financial support. The campaign launched in May 2013, but the crowdfunding initially struggled, and it seemed the team was not going to reach their funding goal. However, in the final week, they released a second gameplay trailer that gave them the boost they needed. Ultimately, they raised over 54,000 euros, and this motivated the three friends to go all in. Without a backup plan, they quit their jobs to focus all their time on Darkwood. They estimated it would take about a full year to finish development. Over the course of the following year, it became clear that the project was full of contradictions, along with other major problems. We did not have any experience or knowledge in the field of design or production, so it took us a lot of time and effort to put the conflicting elements of the puzzle together. With time, also the differences in our visions started to emerge, and we were unable to resolve them all completely. This was coupled with the poor organization of our work. Every decision, even the smallest ones, were made together, which considerably delayed the production of the game and often led to misunderstandings and frustrations. Essentially, it came down to two visions for Darkwood. One emphasized permadeath, high replayability, a significant role for procedurally generated worlds, and a large number of mini-stories. The other focused on handcrafted locations, scripted events, and a branching narrative as the main incentive for exploration. Over time, it became clear that these two approaches were incompatible. After a lot of discussions, the developers started to lean more towards the second vision. This meant removing permadeath entirely. A difficult decision given they had promised Indiegogo backers that it would be a core feature. Because the procedural generation aspect had been built around permadeath, the team had to redirect much of the game's design. As development progressed, they gradually scaled back their use of procedural generation, a shift that posed significant technical challenges. Although buildings and other landmarks remain randomly placed on the map for each playthrough, the original plan for a fully procedurally generated forest is no longer present. Meanwhile, in other areas, the game's scope continued to grow until it was far too ambitious to complete within a single year. Knowing they had something special on their hands, the developers refused to compromise just to meet their initial deadline. This inevitably meant delaying the release, but there was one major problem. The studio was running out of money. Their Indiegogo campaign had been funded based on a one-year development timeline. After considering their options, the developers chose to release an early access version of Darkwood on Steam. They hoped this would not only secure additional funding, but also provide valuable community feedback. Darkwood's early access release was positively received by players and sold far more copies than anticipated. Encouraged by this, the three friends decided to expand the game's scope even further, including the addition of new NPCs to interact with. In the early stages of development, all three contributed to character design, but Arthur soon became mainly responsible for this task. The Wolfman was the first character for which Arthur created concept art. Initially, he was a one-dimensional, over-the-top figure that combined the worst traits of both animals and humans. As development progressed and new characters and story elements were added, the Wolfman became more nuanced and mysterious. However, the team kept him as the game's most obvious antagonistic NPC, providing a stark contrast to the other characters in Darkwood. During the early access phase, the developers frequently tested new mechanics to gauge their impact on the overall experience and see how the community would react. Jakub recalls one instance when they introduced the first iteration of shadow creatures, which received such a negative response that they removed them almost immediately. After completely redesigning the creatures, they reintroduced them, this time without significant problems or backlash. By then, the three developers had begun to mostly overcome their fear of horror games and scary movies, which provided fresh inspiration for the remainder of Darkwood's development. Composing the game's soundtrack and creating sound effects proved challenging, primarily because neither Arthur, Gustav nor Jakub had much, if any, experience with sound design or music composition. My specialization is art, but as I was the only person in the team that had any idea about making sound, although still very vague, sound design and music fell on my shoulders. Making Darkwood's OST was a never-ending improvisation. I was playing with a medium that I did not fully understand. Maybe thanks to that, we were able to create something unique and hard to define, something that breaks the common principles, which I did not know about during production. Arthur used a largely minimalist approach to audio, leaving long stretches of silence to build tension and dread. This, along with other techniques, allowed the horror to play out partly in the player's mind, effectively toying with their imagination. After multiple nervous breakdowns, nightmares, and non-stop crunch the last 2 years, Darkwood was starting to look like a cohesive video game. However, the team's democratic approach of discussing every issue together led them to miss every deadline they set. Over time, negative Steam reviews began appearing from players frustrated by the slow development. Some even suspected the studio had abandoned the game. Finally, in August 2017, after 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, Darkwood version 1.0 was released on Steam. Both gamers and critics were impressed with the final result, especially by how each element contributed to a cohesive and terrifying horror experience. The slow-building tension, minimalist soundtrack, strategic use of silence, and fragmented story, requiring players to piece it together themselves, were all universally praised. The team, however, had little time to celebrate, as they were very busy with fixing bugs and other technical issues. In fact, Gustav spent the evening of his 30th birthday having a meltdown while trying to fix a save file problem that many players were experiencing. Meanwhile, they were getting flooded by emails. Most of them were scams from people claiming to be YouTubers or bloggers, hoping to score a free Steam key. Initially, the studio handed out keys without hesitation, wanting Darkwood to gain as much attention as possible. Unfortunately, many of these keys were then sold on controversial storefronts like G2A. When the developers discovered this, they were furious. It became impossible for them to do giveaways or provide keys to those who genuinely couldn't afford the game. Moreover, seeing people refund the game on Steam made them realize they should offer the game for free. Steam lets you refund the game if you haven't played it for more than 2 hours, and as a developer, we can see the reason why people refunded it. When we read the explanation from someone who wrote that he needed the refund because he didn't want his parents to be stressed out when seeing the bill at the end of the month, well, it made us feel quite bad. Acid Wizard Studio chose to make Darkwood available for free through a save torrent on the Pirate Bay, an unusual move for a small studio that had just released its first game. Though they needed the income to continue developing games, it was more important to Arthur, Gustav, and Jakub that people who genuinely couldn't afford the game still had access to it. Additionally, they hoped to draw attention to the problematic practices of Steam key reseller sites. The reaction to their decision was overwhelmingly positive, earning support from both the press and players worldwide. Many people even bought the game simply to show their support for the studio's decision. Once the dust had settled, the developers took a well-deserved break. Although creating and releasing Darkwood was immensely satisfying, it was also the hardest thing any of them had ever done, leaving them emotionally exhausted. They were so drained, in fact, that they waited 5 years before publicly revealing what they'd been doing during that time. In a 2023 post on Imgur, the team shared that Darkwood had sold 1.5 million copies. They also noted it's debatable whether that figure would be higher or lower if they hadn't posted the game on the Pirate Bay. Regardless, the sales numbers surpassed their wildest expectations. The post then explained that developing Darkwood took such a physical and mental toll on the team that they took an extended break throughout 2018. By 2019, they felt ready to re-enter the world of game development. The team spent many days establishing core rules for handling future projects, and they hired 3 additional developers to help lighten the workload. It seemed fitting to begin this new chapter by creating an update for Darkwood that addressed technical issues and bugs they hadn't previously been able to fix. Unfortunately, the extensive backend work required for this update made it far more complicated than anticipated. Due to limited manpower and a desire to finally release a new game, the team decided to place the update on the back burner until after they launched another project. They briefly considered returning to the world of Darkwood with a sequel, spin-off, prequel, or even DLC, but the memory of the immense effort poured into Darkwood was still too fresh. Ultimately, creating a new IP felt more exciting. After brainstorming various ideas, they settled on a concept they codenamed The Prisoner. It tells the story of a political prisoner trapped in a factory-turned-prison, set in a fictional Eastern European setting during the 1980s. The entire experience is presented in first person, immersing the player in the harsh reality of prison life. The unique hook is that the protagonist has a highly valued talent, the ability to design and apply tattoos. According to the studio, a complex language of symbols was planned, meaning that figuring out exactly what to draw, based on each client's allegiance, crimes, and requests, would be integral to the gameplay. All of this was combined with survival mechanics, exploration, and plenty of NPCs to meet. However, as they continued prototyping gameplay ideas, it became clear that the theme of prison life wasn't a good fit for most of the team. they decided to move on and explore two new concepts, codenamed 101 and Soccer Kids. The first was an experimental, unsettling, fourth wall-breaking idea set in the 1980s, involving multiple intertwined games and featuring unusual asynchronous online gameplay, an homage to those old NES cartridges packed with hundreds of games. Soccer Kids, on the other hand, began as a physical gameplay experiment using a magnetic board and various items found around the office. From this setup, an idea emerged: children playing soccer through the eyes of a mathematical prodigy who analyzes every angle and distance in detail. The setting was close to the developers' hearts, Poland in the 90s, but instead of a creepy forest, they crafted a vivid, playful, over-the-top world seen through the lens of kids who had watched too many cartoons. Soccer Kids turned out to be the perfect fit for their next project, so the team worked on it until they had a fully playable build. In June 2023, they released it for free on Steam, encouraging players to share their feedback with the goal of making an improved commercial version. Less than 2 months later, Acid Wizard Studio announced they're taking a break for the foreseeable future and explained their reasoning on Twitter. We haven't been able to create a work environment that would not be destructive to our personal lives. Our families are our top priority and they should not be affected negatively by our work. So ultimately we decided that it would be best if we part ways, with a possibility of returning in 5 to 10 years when we get our shit together. As a final farewell, Darkwood received one last major update addressing numerous bugs and introducing various quality of life improvements. The studio emphasized they weren't disappearing entirely and hoped their games would continue to live on. They mentioned the possibility of others creating a Darkwood sequel or continuing development on Soccer Kids. While it may be a long time before we see Acid Wizard Studio or any of their IPs return to the gaming world, the fact that 3 inexperienced friends from Poland left such a lasting impact on the horror genre is a remarkable achievement that won't be forgotten anytime soon.
I'm being PvP'd! You there! Heal me, please! This one guy keeps chasing me! Protect me, please!
What's the scariest painting in art history? There are some strong contenders, like The Judgment of Cambyses by Gerard David, Hieronymus Bosch's rendering of Hell, Henry Fuseli's Nightmare, and Edvard Munch's The Scream. But there's only ever really been one painting that has seriously disturbed me. This one. Francisco Goya's Saturn devouring his son. What you're seeing here is the legendary Spanish painter's depiction of the Greek titan Cronus, who after usurping power from his father was told a prophecy that one of his own sons would do the same and usurp him. In order to prevent this, every time his queen Rhea bore a child, Cronus would eat it. Unfortunately for him, in the end Rhea conspired to hide away their youngest son, Zeus, who eventually fulfilled the prophecy, exiled his father, and ended the reign of the Titans. The story is a well-known Greek myth, but look at how Goya handles it. Some key changes jump out right away. First, in the myth, Cronus devours his children by swallowing them whole. In fact, they remain alive in his stomach. Goya's painting is a much more gruesome affair. He takes some inspiration here from Peter Paul Rubens, a Flemish Baroque painter who depicted this same event as well. In Rubens' Saturn, the Titan seems to be sucking the life force from his child. Even for such a terrifying subject matter, Rubens displays all the drama, richness, even beauty that marks the Baroque style he helped to make famous. In Goya's version, that beauty is gone. We're left with a frightened, crazed monster discovered in the dark as if by some explorer with a torch who wandered into the wrong cave. Saturn, Cronus' Roman name, has already chewed off the head of his child. His black mouth opens around the elbow of the left arm, ready to bite it off at the joint. His angular body is crouching in an awkward position. His hands dig into the spine. Blood runs down his child's arm and neck and shoulder, a startling primary color. And if we take a closer look, we notice that this is not a child at all, but one of Saturn's kids grown up. There's something even more terrifying in knowing that the victim knew what was happening and tried to fight back. But what's most disturbing of all, I think, is when and where this painting was found. Late in his life, Francisco Goya purchased a house on the outskirts of Madrid called the Quinta del Sordo, or the Villa of the Deaf, after its previous owner. An interesting coincidence, since by that time in his life, Goya was deaf too. His physical and mental health declining, Goya painted 14 murals, often referred to as the Black Paintings, directly onto the interior walls of his home. Saturn devouring his son was in the dining room. The photographs you're seeing now were taken over 50 years after that time. Goya never mentioned the paintings himself. He never intended for anyone to see them. To this day, people still puzzle over the meaning of the Black Paintings. Why was Goya creating these pessimistic and fantastical scenes in the solitude of his home? To understand this, it might help to go back through Goya's career. He grew up in Zaragoza, Spain, the fourth of 6 children in a lower middle-class family. By all accounts, he was a light-hearted and joyful kid as he studied painting in Zaragoza, Madrid, and Rome. His first serious job was at the Royal Tapestry Factory, where he created tapestry cartoons to adorn the palaces and stately homes of the city. These tapestries take their cue from the Rococo style, elegant, playful, light scenes of both nobility and peasantry enjoying the normal activities of their day. Goya eventually became the court painter for King Charles IV, a disappointing monarch, unlike his father, Charles III, who was beloved by the people for enacting reforms that began to bring secular Enlightenment values to Spain. In 1793, an unknown illness left Goya deaf. And though he still took commissions from his royal clientele, this disease was a dark turning point in his life and art. You can see it in Yard with Lunatics from 1794. Bodies grapple and cry out in anguish. The difference between this and the tapestry cartoons is shocking. His hearing gone, Goya began to see the country around him with a grim clarity. In a series of etchings called Los Caprichos, or The Caprices, he sends up a Spanish culture that is both tragic and comic. A student of the Enlightenment himself, Goya sees the country backsliding on the road to modernity. The king is withdrawn, and the people are superstitious and too stupid to know what they need. You can see him fusing all the corners of his imagination: the quest for anatomical truth, the need for social critique, and an obsession with beasts and creatures. It's all summed up in this one, aptly titled, "The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters." In the following years, things got worse for Spain. Napoleon invaded the country and brutally massacred those who resisted his campaign. Goya was witness to the bloodshed, and it affected him deeply. His painting on the subject, the 3rd of May, 1808, is a revelatory depiction of war, resistance, and brutality. Before this, war was a highly composed, theatrical subject in painting. Here, Goya gives nothing but brute force, its emotion unmediated by artifice. It would be 5 years until Spain regained its throne. In the interim, resistors developed the Constitution of 1812, which called for liberal reforms like national sovereignty, freedom of the press, and free enterprise. But on gaining power, the new king, Ferdinand VII, squashed the Constitution right away and arrested those who made it. Goya withdrew, disheartened. The country which in his youth had reached toward a new world was now swallowed again by autocracy. Scarred by war, scarred by illness, he began to paint nightmare scenes onto the walls of his home. In one, a young man is being eaten by the father he was prophesied to usurp. By now, Goya knows progress isn't assured, and when it's defeated, it's not painless. It's horrific and slow, and the victim can feel it happening. There are a lot of ways that you can read Saturn devouring his son. Maybe Goya was trying to exorcise the demons of his mind, or the demons of his country. Or maybe he was just trying to paint honestly about one terrifying facet of man's nature, using the skills and techniques he learned and pioneered through a lifetime. The black paintings changed the history of art, but what's maybe scariest of all is that Goya didn't care. He doesn't care how we read this painting, because he didn't paint it for us, or for anyone. Saturn devouring his son exists beyond interpretation. It's brute force, horror without mediation. A monster looking out from a dark wall in a dark room. Chewing. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. If you want to make a website and you want
I remember reading on an article by Brian Bishop of The Verge years ago on the art of jump scare, where he described its components and compared it with the 3 stages of illusion detailed in Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. There's the pledge, where a character is placed into a potentially dangerous situation, the turn, where the threat is seemingly resolved and the tension removed, and the prestige, where an unexpected scare hits us without warning. This specific structure seems to have become the golden rule for horror film jump scares, and if you pay attention, you'll realize that pretty much every jump scare out there follows this exact formula with minor deviations. Let me show you a quick example. A man is looking around a creepy looking house and hears a noise. That's the pledge. He then takes the flashlight and examines the space where the noise came from and finds nothing. That's the turn. Double check for safety, and it seems like the problem is solved. The prestige. Do you see what I mean? Okay, one more. A nurse hears a loud cracking from one of the patient rooms, so she enters, tensed up, carefully examining the room, only to find out that it was just some ice cubes from a cup of water. The problem seems resolved until...
Can't I get any sleep? What the hell do you want?
The prestige. And no, not all jump scares are in 3 stages. Some of them only have 2, like this scene from David Sandberg's short film, Lights Out. Or this scene from Insidious. You know what, let's add this to the list.
Cooper's life, this is about all mankind. There is a moment.
And I'm sure we've all seen this.
Birds.
Okay, maybe not that one. What I'm trying to say is that we've come to an era where making breakfast turns into a jump scare and with its overabundance has completely lost its value, being perceived as cheap and lazy. Even when it does get creative, breaking the cliched structure and approaching the audience with a fresh jump, something always feels lacking, doesn't it? As if there's no substance to the fright. But it's not the technique itself that's at fault, it's the way they're used that's the problem. You see, a jump scare isn't just a loud. What many horror films seem to have forgotten is that jump scares are actually meant to bridge the scenes of a film, conveying its central idea while, sure, also startling the audience. But as a shock that's carried over to the next scene, not relieved and done with. Now, there's one director who's not really known for horror films, but who I think is one of the best directors out there when it comes to creating genuine scares. David Lynch. There's a scene from his 2001 film Mulholland Drive that I think demonstrates the most perfect use of a jump scare, defying the conventional rules I've mentioned before. To give you a brief context, this scene happens roughly 12 minutes into the film and has nothing to do with what's previously been shown. This is the first time we see these characters and we have no clue of who or where they are and why the scene is even happening. In the film's defense, the scene is meant to be this way and is purposeful not just to the scene itself, but to the rest of the film. So the scene starts off with two men in a restaurant named Winkies. Man A opens up the conversation by saying how he's had a dream of this exact place. Man B isn't exactly happy he's brought here just for a dream tale, but decides to listen. Man A explains that it's the second dream he's had and that they're both the same dream, unfolding the same way, starting off with him sitting at this exact table and the other man standing by the counter. And he adds that both of them were petrified beyond description for some reason. We, like the other man, are confused, but curious. Man A goes on with his story saying that
there's a man
at the back of this restaurant.
He's the one who's doing it.
That it's his horrifying face that the man never wishes to see again outside the dream. And that's it. They're here to see if that man from the dream is out there, to get rid of this god-awful feeling. That's quite a long build-up for a jump scare, you may think, but what happens from here on is even more interesting.
Right then.
Man B gets up to pay for the meals, and right at that moment, this is where the real build-up begins. The moment the characters and the audience realize that there is a man outside. So the two step out, and following the lead of Man A, we head to the back of the restaurant, going toward the climax we know is coming, but are not ready to face. The camera focuses on objects and signs that we instinctively know are from the dream, the reality unfolding just the same way. He's hesitant to reach the back, as are we, but determined to end this fear, he continues. And the scene ends. I obviously didn't show the entire thing, so I recommend you watch the full scene separately, but you probably still agree that it was a very unsettling encounter. If you think about it though, everything about this scene is counterintuitive. Firstly, we don't even know these characters. Having no emotional attachment to the characters on screen should be a barrier in creating an atmosphere for an effective scare.
That's it.
Also, the scene is absent of both the turn and the prestige. There was no misdirection. We knew the scare was coming and when it was gonna happen. So why then does the scene work, and more importantly, perfect? Before anything, and a minor spoiler warning for those who haven't watched the film, Mulholland Drive at the end of the day is all about a dream. The audience isn't aware of this yet, but the scene nonetheless perfectly sets the ground for what's to come, strengthening the rest of the film with its hypnotic setup. First, it takes place in the middle of the day, at a diner full of people, going against the formalities of a horror film, transforming a place of security into one that is threatening. When there is light, it's always overexposed, hinting at the unearthly nature of the setting, and when the characters are finally outside, what seemed like a bright daytime has converted into an ambiguous one, exactly like the dream the man had.
It's not day or night. It's kind of half night, you know?
The sound design is carefully crafted so that no other characters are heard and the voices of the two men are private, putting them into a trance-like state as if the place is secluded.
Of all people, you're standing right over there.
And the people surrounding them mere constructs of their mind. The result is a discrepancy between what we hear and what we see, a dreamlike sensation that augments the appalling narrative. The unknown man enters the scene with a loud, muffled noise, but the sound immediately gets drowned and we're left with an ominous sub-bass instead of the usual bang that often accompanies the jump scare. Not to mention that the pacing of the conversation throughout is slightly off as well. There are awkward pauses and moments of disconnection between every line that's delivered, and it further blurs the line between what's real and what's not. In fact, everything is meticulously planned for this exact purpose. For example, that man at the back of the restaurant is actually a woman. Her name is Bonnie Aarons, who you may recognize as the nun from The Conjuring 2. She's deliberately introduced as the man because, as subtle as it may be, that adds to the uncanniness of the whole scene. Which brings me lastly to the camera work. Except for the stationary shot of the Winkies, the rest are all unfixed, either on a crane or seemingly handheld, unsteadily floating in the air like a ghost. Not only does this create an elusive, surreal atmosphere, but it builds tension and a sense of uneasiness for the scene that might otherwise feel stale. Also note that the conversation mostly features over-the-shoulder shots to establish a connection between the two characters. That man B, in spite of his indifferent attitude, is on the same page, and that they are both inevitably a part of this nightmare. The shot also tends to move out of the OTS shot into an isolated single shot to inform us that the story being told is at its most crucial, and at the same time serves to emphasize that the other character may be finding the situation to be indiscernible, or at the very least is going through his own thoughts that the other character can't empathize with. The dreamlike crane shot spontaneously shifts the perspective from over the shoulder to single and vice versa, and so the subtle buildup of tension is only unconsciously piled up within us, while also keeping us entertained. The diner scene ends by having the camera stay at the table, and we understand that thus far the camera was simply following the character's lead. Once the men are outside, the camera now stays one step ahead, guiding them, and in turn forcing us to face the fright that awaits at the back of the restaurant. Each step of the way, our fear becomes materialized and the doubt transforms into certainty that the thing will appear. The revelation is particularly daunting because of this buildup, but also because the camera makes sure to have it fill up the entire frame to maximize the surprise and lessen the chance of us discerning its exact features. Notice how the creature isn't fully caught by the camera when it re-enters the frame to hide behind the walls. With a blink of an eye, it's gone. From the frame and from our memory, and we're left alone in shock, not by its looks, but by its existence, a more lasting terror. And then we cut to this. Is he dead, or has he just fainted? One can't be sure, but it's a traumatic aftermath that allows for no relief and therefore no ending. The tension is still high because the characters aren't okay. And as we desperately try to regain our composure, Lynch gives you this as the last thing we see before the scene ends. The pledge that keeps you anxious to check every corner, suspect every movement for the rest of the film, and perhaps even for the rest of the night. But you won't find anything because that's the turn. And you'll feel like the threat has been removed until The Prestige. Thanks everyone for watching my video. What an amazing scene. I had a lot of fun with this one as always, and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you'd like to support my work, I have a Patreon account, link in the description, and you can get access to my behind the scenes booklets, monthly podcasts, and various other things, so go check it out. And always feel free to follow me on Instagram if you just want to chat. And that's it for me.
He feels nauseated. Next to him, his wife wakes up. She thinks it may be a gas leak from a stove she left on, so she tries to get out of bed, but her muscles are weak too. She's nearly paralyzed. A few miles over in the same town of Mattoon, Illinois, a cough in the night wakes up a young mother. She opens the door to her daughter's room only to find her unable to move, muscles weak, nearly paralyzed. A third incident is reported.
911, what's your emergency?
Mrs. Kearney of Marshall Avenue smells a strong and sweet odor. She assumes it to be the smell of a newly planted flower bed outside, continues on with her night, but it grows stronger. She begins losing feeling in her legs. She calls to her sister, who enters the room and notices one of the bedroom windows are open. The police are called and they check the surrounding home. No evidence of a peeping Tom. They leave.
You're watching Mysteries on Disrupt.
2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. But don't worry, the best way to prevent this is to do something about it while you still have hair left. In comes Keeps. A licensed doctor will review your information directly online and recommend the best hair loss treatment plan for you. After that, it's shipped directly to your door every 3 months. Inside, you'll find generic versions of FDA-approved medications, which means it's way more affordable. Plus, you can message your personal Keeps doctor 24/7 with any questions or concerns you may have along the way. Give it about 4 to 6 months, and you'll start to see results. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, you can head on over to keeps.com/disrupt or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. Mr. Kearney is returning from his work as a taxi driver when he notices a figure outside their home. He chases the guy but is unable to catch him. His description? A tall man, dressed in black, wearing something around his head. That same day, 2 similar incidents are reported: strange odors, weakening effects, a gas mask. The Cords are returning home after a date night when they notice something sitting on the porch. A small handkerchief. She picks up the cloth, feels a jolt of electricity. Her face begins swelling, a burning sensation in the mouth and throat, vomit, partial paralysis. Authorities scan the area and find a skeleton key, a type of master key, on the sidewalk adjacent to the porch. And again, a few blocks away at the home of Mrs. Burrell, she spots the outline of a masked stranger. Over the following week, more incidents are reported. 2 women describe seeing blue vapor and hearing a motorized buzzing sound. Public concern grows, and the FBI are called in to the small town. Local police issue a statement. The last known report comes the following day from a Bertha Birch, a figure in the night who fled. When checking the area, a woman's footprints were found at the scene.
I'm Rod Serling. You're listening to the Zero.
At this point, the town is split. Some believe there's a masked maniac roaming. Others say the media is spreading false stories that only further propagate fear. The chief of police issues a press conference where he states that the odors and symptoms may have been the result of pollutants or toxic waste released by nearby industrial plants. They speculate that the chemical and can both induce symptoms similar to those reported. In response, Atlas Imperial, the factory closest to the town, denies the allegations, stating they only had a few gallons of the aforementioned chemicals, all of which were secured. Eventually, the reports cease, and the town returns to normality. In our first draft of this video, that's where it ended. But things felt, too in the air. Was it really a case of mass hysteria? Like, what were the odors and why did so many people report the same sequence of events within such close times of each other? That's when I dug deeper. Way back in the depths of the search engine, behind a paywall and buried in an article from 2003, an explanation appears. Author Scott Maruna had been following the case for the past 2 years, interviewing old residents of the town, digging up newspaper articles from the local archive, when finally, a person of interest. The legend goes that the grocer in the community was a well-respected man, but his son was an outcast, so he leaves for university to get a chemistry degree, then returns and spends most of his time in a lab he builds on the family property. A few days before the first gas attack, residents report a small explosion coming from the property. This narrows things down to a specific chemical called nitromethane, which has a few characteristics. 1, it's highly volatile. 2, it's sweet smelling. And 3, it causes nausea, burning of the mouth, swelling of the lips. From here, residents and police began suspecting it's the grocer's boy, so they set up surveillance on the kid, but the attacks continue, so they write him off. One resident who grew up at the time claims he enlisted his sister's help in an attempt to clear his name before wrapping up the entire thing. They believe he wanted to blow up the town. All in all, the family eventually places the young man in a mental institution where he remains for the rest of his days.
Hey, Vsauce.
please! This one guy keeps chasing me! Protect me, please! Here he comes! Derek! Do not look at him.
Don't mind if I do.
I will handle this, says confidently as he draws his demon obliterator 5 million. We are proud to present our newest 6-month subscription mount, but what about the bots? Also, please enjoy our newest anniversary special, so you can keep coming back for these specials.
More than 15 years ago, I visited one of my first internet cafes. As I took a peek at what people were playing, my attention was fixated on one specific game. That game was Warcraft 3. Everything about it just seemed to excite me. The art style, the gameplay, the graphics, the visuals, the story, the setting. And when I did sit down to try it as well, goddamn, I was having an absolute blast. And the masterminds behind it, Blizzard Entertainment. A video game company that would soon become my absolute favorite in the industry. But little did I know, there was already something even more exciting already on the market. And that of course was World of Warcraft. And look, maybe it's biased, but I firmly believe that at its peak, World of Warcraft could provide you with the absolute best gaming experience ever. Full stop, it wasn't even close. But for the time being, I knew I found the game that I could sink my teeth in and waste God knows how many years into it. But if at that very moment, an entity from the future traveled back in time to tell me I'd eventually be torn between continuing to create videos for that game I once loved and the growing frustration I had towards it and its developers while crippling burnout set in, then I'd be a little disturbed, but also I would have had a hard time believing it. After finding out World of Warcraft was a thing, I knew I had to play as soon as possible. I couldn't contain myself any longer, okay? But tragedy. I found out you had to pay for it. You had to pay for it a lot. So of course I decided to ask my parents if they'd buy it for me. They didn't even know what a video game was. And here I am asking for 30 bucks an extra every month. Yeah, not happening. Therefore, I was condemned to play random free-to-play MMOs for years. Until I found out World of Warcraft private servers were a thing, which meant that I could finally try the actual game out. And, wow, it was everything I hoped it would be. And then some. I started off with Wrath of the Lich King. It was all put together perfectly. You got to immerse yourself in the whole Warcraft universe as one sole chump, where you could practically go anywhere and do anything. So many places to explore, so much satisfying progression to be had, and so many people to interact with, as it is an MMORPG. To truly glaze WoW's strengths though, I'll probably have to make a whole separate video on the topic. But my love for WoW continued to only grow. It quickly began to absorb my day-to-day life. As I was thinking about it, as I went to bed, when I was in class, I'd explain its lore to my friends who had no idea what I was even talking about. And when we'd be given English writing assignments in school, I remember I wrote at least a couple about Blizzard. They were just that awesome to me. Not only with WoW, but the more attention I paid to them made me realize that these guys were cooking non-stop. And just seemed like very passionate nerds who wanted to provide reasons for other nerds to be excited about. Every game they released, it was the best game of that genre. Well, I guess until Heroes of the Storm, which I actually liked at the start. And so eventually it was time to decide what the hell am I supposed to do with my life. The classic struggle of a teen who barely understands how the world works. Naturally, my parents wanted me to become a doctor, but little did they know I was concocting quite the silly little prank on them, as I had already began sinking more and more time online, absorbing video after video, and eventually thinking, yeah, this seems cool, maybe I could do it. As I was growing up, I was always impressed with the old WoW community and just how creative and dedicated they were. There was so much effort poured into silly little videos, with little promise of any benefits like popularity or income, but regardless, people were spending ungodly amounts of hours creating highly entertaining content. To me, that was a sign of a healthy community. People were so invested in the game and satisfied with its state that they were driven and inspired to spend their free time creating something in its honor. One type of content that stood out to me was the animations, or machinimas, and I really wanted to give it a go someday. Big mistake. I didn't know jack about making anything this complicated, yet alone use all the necessary softwares, but I kept at it. Watched guides, read forum posts, practiced, experimented, and eventually I managed to put together my very first WoW video. And I went ahead and posted it, and the very first comment I ever got... Ah, come on, bro. But past that, people seemed to enjoy it. And slowly but surely, I began refining my work to a point where I could be happy with it. Around that time, I had gotten the official World of Warcraft. I just remember sitting there and staring at the box with disbelief. And this was during, Warlords of Draenor. What a time to start, right? So, the general impression from the WoW community was that WoD was complete trash. Blissful times, am I right? But personally, I thought it was pretty nice. Leveling was cool, zones felt great, except the non-jungle. Fuck the non-jungle. And the storytelling was pretty trash, feeling like some weird spin-off / OVA episode. But it overall went pretty fine. And then it was time for Legion. Now, despite the more positive reception it got, this was probably the first time that I had ever played WoW. And after spamming the endgame slog of world quests and all that nonsense, a thought emerged in my head. Am I having fun with this? I even thought the story was a huge letdown, since this time it had to do with the Legion, a super prominent force in WoW's lore, who had a very disappointing ending. But nonetheless, I ignored the creeping dread just like any grown adult. And besides, it didn't matter either way. WoW is my game, you know? Even if I didn't find this expansion too fun, this is Blizzard we're talking about. The gaming Goliaths. They'll come in swinging with an even more amazing expansion that'll keep me severely invested in the game. Right? Yeah. We all know how that one went. Although BFA had to be one of the biggest abominations of all time, I have to say, the hype was there. Oh yeah, leading up to the launch, Blizzard did a good job of getting people excited. I remember everyone I knew looking forward to it, especially me as a PvP enjoyer, and how they advertised it as a good old faction war expansion, woo! After reaching the endgame, and experiencing whatever the hell that amalgamation was of dailies, weeklies, rep farms, chores, dumb borrowed power systems, this freaking guy, and the disappointing role of one of the most anticipated entities in WoW lore. He just like appeared, and 10 seconds later it was like... I couldn't exactly put my finger on it, but my doubts from Legion resurfaced. Little did I know, the stages of grief had already begun. At first, I was in denial. No way, I can't be bored of this. WoW is my game. Surely I'm probably growing out of it, perhaps. The problem has to be with me. With that, I began to play as if I'm having fun. I just forced myself. I began making myself binge a lot of WoW content, watch a lot of streams, videos. I'd make myself stay on top of my dailies and weeklies, ask other people to play with me. I was doing everything. Yet after weeks and months of trying, that feeling, that magic, just wasn't there anymore. And here came the second stage. Anger. I wasn't the only one who had realized something about WoW was off. This was the prime time that the community began to become a lot more aware of Blizzard's bullshit, as they were sucking the fun out of the game and making it into a dull Excel spreadsheet simulator. Not only that, but Blizzard's Activision was starting to show more and more. They began sounding much more corporate, greed-orientated, insulting their community's intelligence, and being downright sleazy. The way they addressed issues became vague and insincere. It became apparent to a lot of people in the WoW community that the company had shifted away from creating fun for players, but rather just creating revenue for their shareholders. Blizzard forgot their good old formula that if they produce something amazing that they love, then players will happily sink their time and money into it. It was clear that there were still many talented people working at Blizzard, but the company no longer seemed to be working in harmony. Some things they created in a vacuum would definitely be well made or look good, but in the grand scheme, they failed to bring cohesion to everything. Which of course not to say that I'm putting blame on these workers. I'm putting blame on the management. To add more fuel to the fire, it just seemed like Blizzard was mixing themselves up into more new shit every week, causing that much more eyes to become open to their bullshit. Only this time their fuck-ups would begin to reach way further than just the the WoW community and generating even more scrutiny from all over the internet. Personally, my thoughts reflected that of many. I began to feel betrayed. As a longtime WoW fan who held WoW and Blizzard in such high regard, I felt alienated and just disrespected. I'd made sure I'd always voice out my disdain with the state of Blizzard and the game at every corner. But just then, a light glittered in the steaming pile of shit as Blizzard announced World of Warcraft Classic. Blizzard listening to the community? Impossible. Everyone was suddenly hyped, and almost as if all the issues began to grow distant. But as with all things Blizzard do nowadays, I'd very soon learn that this was just another monkey's paw. Yet, at the time, I just wanted to try the version of the game that I could never afford as a kid. Vanilla. In retrospect, I can safely say that the first few months of Classic as it rolled out were probably one of the best gaming experiences I have ever had. And not only me, it absolutely blew up. It garnered so much attention from all over the world. It was truly like an explosion. But more importantly, playing and enjoying Classic proved me one thing. No, I was not growing out of WoW. The issue was not with me. I very much still enjoy WoW when it is a good game. Just like when it used to be once upon a time. Back when a cool piece of armor meant something special. When all that time spent traveling to your next destination felt like a small step towards something great. When the game could really immerse you into its setting. All these reasons, and many more, were what made WoW a household name after all. Though this eye-opening experience really amplified my cynical view of Blizzard, as it became that much easier to compare the fruit of their labor of the past compared to that of the present. And the main difference that I noticed was the presence of high highs and low lows. Whether you and your group wiped to elite mobs or the time you prevailed against a ganker, Old WoW was a roller coaster of happenings that could turn into memorable moments which you could reminisce about years later. While in New WoW, it tries to be a fairly stagnant line, nothing overly bad nor great happening. For me, I can safely say that in the past 5 or so years of playing retail, I had barely made any worthwhile memories. Meanwhile, 5 months into Classic launch, and I had already made so many, some of which inspired a number of my videos. Though I already have made a video where I talk about my experiences with Classic specifically. During it, my channel really began to gain momentum and grow. And apart from practicing my creativity, my videos also became an outlet to vent my frustrations. Sometimes the shit Blizzard would do would be so unbelievable that it would be more unhinged than the parody scripts I'd put together. I didn't want to just be in Blizzard's good boy list. If they were doing good, I'd be singing their praises. But if they were doing shit, I didn't want to pull any punches, and I wanted to make sure people know. Though my content surely brought in a lot of people to try WoW again, or for the first time, I still wanted to bring attention to some of its issues. Time went on and my love for WoW and Blizzard quickly declined, though now it was finally time to move on from BFA and go to the next big expansion. Would Blizzard take this opportunity to actually redeem themselves, at least with World of Warcraft retail? Would they actually acknowledge their fuck-ups and consider the community's woes? Would they take a good look at themselves and see how they can reclaim their status to some degree? I can't lie. Despite my increasingly negative opinion of WoW, I had a small part of me still quietly rooting for the new expansion in the back of my mind, hoping for anything that would show signs of progress once more. And that expansion was of course Shadowlands. It came out, I played it for a few weeks to a month, I just stopped whatever bullshit I was doing in the mall, and just stared at my monitor. And at that moment, almost as if a string snapped in my head. Hope was dead. I turned it off, cancelled my subscription, and that was it. Like leaving a toxic relationship. That was now around almost 4 years ago, and ever since then, I've been doing my own little boycott on Blizzard, as I no longer believed they deserved any of my money. During all my years with WoW, I had times when I take breaks from the game, but at the back of my mind I always knew I'd be back. But not this time, and I have never given a single fuck for the new releases from then on. Classic, even though an already complete 20-year-old game, Blizzard still found a way to mess it up or drop the ball. Net worth check? Yeah, these guys couldn't be asked to hire one janitor on minimum wage to quickly cover with GM privileges over the Hillsbrad area near Tarren Mill with the Bears, where at least at all times there were 7 bots farming them, or any other obvious areas for that matter. But hey, the bots pay a monthly sub, right? Why bother? And if you manage to get on their bad side,
New this morning, police are searching for the robbers who stole more than $2 million worth of diamond jewelry in the Bronx. Happened just after 2:30 Friday afternoon.
On the 5th of August 2022, 4 criminals committed a smash and grab robbery and escaped with over $2 million worth of jewelry in the Bronx. Just 45 days later, $2 million worth of in-game items were hijacked from a single user's Steam account. One of these heists was covered on huge news networks, the other was talked about on Twitch and YouTube. One of these heists had the risk of 20 years in jail, the other had no risk whatsoever. Despite all of these factors, all of the robbers had the same chance of making the same amount of money. This is the story of the $2 million Steam heist. Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all the information sent between your device and the internet, which keeps your personal data protected from big companies or cyber criminals. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers across 100 different countries, allowing you to unlock thousands of different libraries of content across so many streaming services like Netflix. Now you don't have to be in Canada to watch Pulp Fiction, you can be anywhere in the world. But my favourite part about Surfshark is their clean web feature, which blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, allowing you to surf the web safely. While researching this video, I ended up realising how common phishing scams really are when browsing the internet, and Surfshark is the perfect solution. Using code BrandonFM, you can get an extra 3 months of Surfshark for free. To make things even better, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk trying it out. Download Surfshark today using the link in my description, because everybody needs a VPN. This story begins with a little game called CSGO. Some of you may have heard of it. Counter-Strike is home to the largest singular player base on Steam, and is also home to the world's most lucrative and legitimate in-game economy. These in-game skins sell for real money millions of times a day, creating a legitimate market that resembles the idea of the stock exchange despite its shallow depth in features and execution. Some skins are worth just a few cents, others are worth enough to buy your family home. Many people old and young, technically savvy and technically incompetent, can't grasp the idea of why an in-game item made from pixels would sell for such an extreme price. Transactions for real-life cash take place on third-party marketplaces that Steam does not own. There are countless sites that offer various ways to trade and sell skins, most of which make millions of dollars from their transaction fees. People make a living through buying and selling skins, people lose their life savings from gambling skins, and some people simply just want to collect. Collecting is often where emotions outweigh monetary gain, which is an extremely difficult thing to achieve unless you have vast amounts of wealth to begin with. However, much like many other markets, the CSGO economy awards those who are patient. This brings us to a man named HFB. HFB was the biggest CSGO collector in the history of the game, and had gained a reputation for owning the most expensive inventory of items on Steam. But by June of 2022, he had not logged into his account for over 3 years, and his inventory had been completely private. This meant that no one could peek into his vault of historic items, his museum of Counter-Strike history. And so, his name became more and more of an urban legend every day. But unfortunately for HFB, that was all about to change. On the 16th of June 2021, an unknown Russian CSGO player had devised a plan to break into HFB's vault. They were going to gain access to his Steam account, sell all of his items on a third-party website, and then vanish. On the surface, a naive dream with no substance. While the average phishing scam works on a concerning amount of the CSGO player base, in this scenario, it won't do. The thief had long realised that if he wanted to pull this off, that wasn't an option. So they started thinking outside the box. You see, a vault is easy to break into with enough time and resources. The tricky part is avoiding the people guarding the vault. That's why the robber knew the only way in was through social engineering, a backdoor. What if you could get Steam support to help you rob the vault instead of guarding it? Well, there was only one way to find out, so they got to work, gathering all the information they needed about HFB's account and personal life through various data leaks. Once they felt like they had enough information, they opened up a Steam support ticket. Now, we could theorize on emails back and forth, security questions, and specifics of the conversation between the thief and Steam support, but I don't really want to go into details on possible ways this CSGO thief might have broken into one of the most valuable digital vaults in the history of the internet. What I will say is either the Russian had an ace up their sleeve that no one could have possibly known about, or they had a man on the inside. The only thing we know for sure is that by the time the support ticket had ended, the thief was logged into HFB's account with a fresh email and password to go along with it. They had successfully made their way inside the vault and changed the combination. Now, they prayed. If you broke into a vault undetected, what would you do? Would you look around for a few minutes and really take everything in? Or would you rush as fast as you can to fit everything in your bag and go? Well, our thief didn't have the luxury of choice, because they knew as soon as they broke in, they wouldn't be able to leave for a while. When an email or password is changed on a Steam account, a trade ban is put on the account for 5 days, meaning no item can leave the inventory of that player under any circumstance. So for the next 120 hours, the thief would have no choice but to look at everything that could be his and wait. Because although he broke into the vault and got past the guards undetected, if HFB notices someone has changed his combination, it was all for nothing. 5 restless nights was the only option. Every day, the thief would wake up, praying HFB did not notice someone was living in the walls of his account. Every day, the thief had to look into the pixels of his monitor that held $2 million worth of items deep within the display. By day 4, the thief had already ran through the exact way that they were going to cash out the items as quickly as possible. However, no matter how hard they tried, the thief could not fall asleep that night. They could only watch the counter go down every minute. Any distraction they tried on themselves got overwhelmed by the ticking timer that stood between them and $2 million. As the minutes got closer, all sounds faded away. Unlike the robbery in the Bronx, this anticipation was much more prolonged. But as the seconds got closer, the adrenaline started to take over. And before the thief knew it, after 120 hours, on June 21st, 2021, the vault had opened. It was time to smash and grab. The thief started moving the valuable items out of the vault and onto the third-party marketplaces, where he would list them for roughly 50% under market value for the fastest exit strategy possible. But what was so insane about this heist is the fact that everybody could see what the thief was doing at all times. For you to successfully sell an item on one of these third-party marketplaces, the inventory your item is coming from has to be public. So for the first time in over 3 years, HFB's inventory could be seen by everyone, and the CSGO community couldn't believe it. However, excitement quickly turned into panic as people realized HFB was not in control of his account. Items worth over $100,000 were being sold for $50. Rare pattern-based and low-flow items were being quick sold to bystanders, and suddenly, the Museum of Memorabilia HFB had owned for years started collapsing in front of the community's eyes. Some items were being sold on a website called Buff, and others were being sold on a random Russian market that most people had never even heard of. By the time it was all said and done, when Steam finally noticed what was happening, the thief was gone. After 5 days of living in the walls of the most prolific vault in video game history, he had been evicted. No one knew how much he had made, and nobody knew how many items were sold. In almost every instance of an account being compromised, Steam does nothing. This is because usually it was an error made by the person who owns the account and not Steam. But in this instance, things are very different, because as we know, it was not HFB's fault his account was compromised. It was a Steam support misstep. So in Steam's mind, there was only one option: to turn back the clocks and reverse time. A thing the CSGO community had never seen before on this scale. Items started disappearing from the players who bought HFB skins on third-party websites, and people started to panic. When word got out, buyers tried to move their items through as many accounts as possible, hiding them in storage containers, making their inventories private, but eventually, after a few days, the vault was back to its original state. And once again, HFB tinted the glass, like nothing ever happened. Now it wasn't HFB who lost hundreds of thousands, it was the rest of the player base. One specific user spent $150,000 sniping HFB's items, and now they were left with absolutely nothing. The third-party marketplaces were doing everything they could to freeze the thieves' funds and refund the players who had lost items. Buff was semi-successful in doing so, but the Russian marketplace was not. It was over. The thief had gotten away with it. When it was all said and done, the thief walked away with upwards of $350,000 in crypto. Nowhere near close to 2 million, but still, a lot of money for some pixels. Luckily, Buff and the Russian marketplace decided to fully refund everyone who purchased a HFB item, meaning it wasn't the player base who took the hit, but instead, the third-party marketplaces. Steam and HFB never commented on the situation, and while there have been suspected Steam accounts that could have belonged to the thief, we simply can't be certain. In the end, Steam had a huge wake-up call to social engineering through Steam support. HFB did not lose any of his items. The CSGO community was left with an insane story. The thief walked away with hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the third-party marketplaces took a big hit. But as the months passed, the question of a man on the inside became more and more intriguing. What if the thief wasn't working alone? Super important quick announcement. Gradient, my clothing brand that I launched last week. The sale is almost done. The drop is almost finished. thank you all for the incredible support on it. If you haven't got a piece yet and you want one, now's the time to get one. And if you don't know about the drop, go check it out. The link will be in the description. The quality of these clothes is just insane, and I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on them. But yeah, that's everything. I'll see you guys soon. It's been 335 days.
This video was sponsored by Raycon. Stick around at the end for a deal on these awesome wireless earbuds. I need to tell you something, and it might be controversial, okay? But let's step past this facade of pleasantry we put up every day. Let's take this video off easy mode, because I need to speak the truth. I like good graphics. I like them a lot. Phew. Feels good to say it out loud, because I'm in deep with this stuff. I watch Digital Foundry like all the time. I want to know exactly how the game's draw distance works. I want them to analyze every strand of Norman Reedus' greasy hair. I love to pretend I understand what it means when they drop sentences like,
rather just with the more or less 2D depth buffer generated from that geometry.
It's just fun, you know? To see how close to realistic games can push themselves. I'm even really into the not in-engine stuff, like I talked about in my FMVs video. I watch the cutscenes and ads made by Blur, not because I have any real attachment to the story or characters, but just because I like seeing how shiny and pretty we can make stuff. I like graphics. And if you're playing video games in the year of our Lord 2020, it's a pretty good time to like graphics. I mean, have you seen Death Stranding? Have you seen The Last of Us 2? Have you seen Red Dead Redemption, God of War, Spider-Man, Uncharted, Tomb Raider, Far Cry, Cyberpunk? On a very base level, it's cool to be living in such a tech arms race, and the developers really highlight this level of technical achievement. We get really close to everyone's face. We see goosebumps appear on Sam's arms. More often than not, these titles will come with a photo mode, letting you zoom in and out and take in all the split-second details that you might ordinarily miss. And then you get to post those details, and we can all bask in how cool it is that Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn has a uvula? Somehow? Another thing that I love to just bask in is these compilations made by people like Sunny Legend and Much118x on Twitter. Look how perfectly they match cut from game to game, a ceaseless montage of graphical powerhouses flowing from one to another like water, a never-ceasing stream of polygons and shaders, a mighty flood of the most expensive and prestigious works the medium has to offer. being glib when I say I find these montages cool. I really do. But they are incredibly good at revealing how much of a look AAA gaming has. The clips just flow into each other so well. The aesthetic changes are so minute. These games share many other traits as well, one of which is that they're all flagships. These are the games that get shown off on the biggest stages that lead press releases and advertising campaigns. For Sony and Microsoft, but like really Sony, these big, beautiful AAA releases are how they prove that their consoles are worth having, that their ecosystems are worth buying into. And because these games are so important to the identity and perception of a console, publishers will invest a lot of money into these things. And because publishers have invested a lot of money into these things, it's important that they drive sales and earn that money back. And what's proven to earn money back? Well, this isn't a hard and fast rule. There are definitely projects like Kingdom Hearts or Sea of Thieves that get big press and lots of attention without showing every pore in the character's skin. I mean, Nintendo exists. We are not starving for alternative styles. But if AAA has a look, it's not this. It's this. There's also an inherent level of prestige that looking like this brings. I feel like we're really susceptible to it, actually. For instance, the life and works of David Cage. That's not entirely fair. I like narrative experimentation a lot. I like bold swings. I like David Bowie. I won't say that all Quantic Dreams games have absolutely garbage tier storytelling only considered worthy of consideration and prestige because of their graphics. But I will say that about Detroit Become Human. This game is bad. This game is not good. This game is a 7-year-old's understanding of a civil rights movement and a 70-year-old's understanding of interactivity. It's hard to overstate how much it bungles its central metaphor. As Suriel Vasquez put it,
yeah, I think the world is worse because that game isn't it. I think it's so bad.
The thing about Detroit Become Human, though, is that it looks really good. Like, it looks really good. I mean, do you see how detailed the textures are here? Do you see how well the digital emotion is conveyed? And I genuinely don't want to condescend towards people who liked it, but the graphics are the thing that gives it that feeling of quality, right? It's kind of hard for me to imagine that this game would have anywhere near the same level of status, level of support, amount of money behind it, if it didn't look so much like what a AAA industry-leading game is supposed to look like. I think we just inherently give it the benefit of the doubt. And you gotta admit, games like Detroit look sweet when they're in a sizzle reel.
Seeking to ensure that flagship projects have a symbolic aesthetic of up-to-dateness, officials allow and often demand a modern appearance, however inappropriate it may be.
That sentence wasn't written about the games industry. It's actually from a 2010 paper on international homogeneity in architecture, written by Kathy Payne and Paul Knox. But boy, if it ain't familiar. Their argument in the paper is that increasingly global money markets controlled by a relatively few set of world cities has led to a convergence in metropolitan form, rather than differences or distinctiveness. What's that mean? It means that the distinctive modern look of skyscrapers in New York is aesthetically pretty damn similar to the distinctive modern look of skyscrapers in London, which is, shocker, near and dear to the distinctive modern look of skyscrapers in Hong Kong. As Knox and Payne note, the aesthetic of the modern landmark, Guggenheim for example, isn't just a cool building. It's an indication to the rest of the world that the landmark city is worthy of an elevated status with the global economy. It's proof that Bilbao, home of this Guggenheim, is legitimate enough as a world city that it should be part of the cash flowing around the globe. And when it's the same handful of people designing these buildings instructed to keep the same style as they used for their other landmark projects, things start to get a little samey. Yeah, every building individually is gorgeous, but
the result is that the more cities compete to be different, the more they end up looking the same, each with their sculptural flagship buildings and generic mixed-use regeneration schemes.
This look becomes the look for modernity, for cutting-edge aesthetics, and mostly for large inflows of money. What these buildings aren't necessarily being designed for is the public good. These big, beautiful pieces of construction designed by what K&P refer to as starchitects don't happen in a vacuum. Instead, they're made possible by neoliberal market forces, ones that simultaneously incentivize inner-city gentrification, divestment in public utilities and infrastructure, a general diminishing of public housing. Take your pick. That aesthetic of modernity might be a signifier that a city is entering the global market, but for the many, many people that won't reap the benefits from that market, it's hard to just go pretty building good. Hey, remember when this essay was about video games? Now look, that got pretty bleak, and I don't want to overstate the parallels here. This isn't a video about how Nathan Drake's impeccably modeled ear cartilage is causing gentrification, though Drake is totally a NIMBY, but I do think it's a useful model for thinking about how we think about graphics, and what the AAA style indicates about the gaming landscape. For instance, one of Sony's prestige projects for the PS4 was the Bluepoint remake of Shadow of the Colossus. And when the game initially released on the PS2, it was stylized like a PS2 game had to be. Incredibly sparse details, barren lands. One of my favorite things that resulted from the stylization is how light worked in the original Colossus. Because devs didn't have the same liberty with lighting tech we have now, the game kind of faked it, turning the bloom up to blinding levels for a couple seconds to emphasize the vibe of a new area. It's an effect that I find just gorgeous. I think the game would lose something without it. And then 2 generations later, Sony and Bluepoint decided to remake the game, and to honor this artistic juggernaut, to indicate that they were putting the full power of their system and publishing ability behind it, they chose, well, you know, they chose realism. They chose the prestige look. To be clear, when I saw this announcement trailer, I jumped out of my chair. I was psyched. I am psyched that it exists, that it is so beautiful, that new generations of people can experience it. But I think the game has lost some of its visual specificity. It feels to me a little less singular now. It fits more neatly into a portfolio. So let's break that portfolio, huh? Let's get a little messy. This video is called Bad Graphics after all. Let's talk about Cosmo D. Cosmo D is a developer with his own universe of games. Off-Peak, the Norwood Suite, and most recently Tales from Off-Peak City. Cosmo D's work does not have what we would typically call good graphics. What it does have is so much more interesting. Conflicting styles are piled on each other in these games, a teetering pile of aesthetics that somehow draws power from its contradictions. Blurry pictures of board games scatter the floor next to absurdly adorned humans selling food that is just way too big. What would Digital Foundry even talk about in a game like this? The shadow resolution? The water physics? The skybox? Houses talk, fire escapes have slides, one building's facade is straight up full of cats. All the normal measures of what qualifies as good or bad graphics here feel pretty meaningless. In the beginning of Tales from Off-Peak City, you take a boat through this building that disappears as soon as you've passed through it. Humans are all variations on the same bizarre model, with a particularly hilarious quirk being that children and babies are just scaled down versions of that same model. Babies are just tiny men. It's like pre-Renaissance pictures of Jesus. The effect of all the anachronisms here, all the combinations of styles and ideas and textures, is that the train station, hotel, and city just feel bursting with life and diversity in a way I rarely feel in games. It's like every part of these spaces was pulled from different worlds and just smashed together in this almost hypnotic fashion. It also helps that I've never played a game that sounds like Cosmo D's work. These games are fundamentally about jazz, about the inspiration and politics behind creating music, and different tunes blast out from every corner of the world. A stroll down the street in Off-Peak City offers a dozen different tracks, each distinct and specific to the person playing them in some indescribable way. There's almost no room between them. As soon as one song fades out, another fades in. In a more realistic setting, in a virtual city that's attempting to emulate our own, the sound design might be too much. But as it exists now, supporting this wild mashup of ideas, it's perfect. Despite all their quote-unquote graphical flaws, I couldn't feel more immersed in these places. Everything, no matter how unusual, is in the city for a narrative reason, Cosmo told me. It's eclectic, but it isn't random. Off-Peak City feels like it has a history, like it doesn't solely exist for the benefit of the player. It also, like the cities we discussed earlier, feels like it's wrestling with the economic change and the conflict of longtime residents versus commercial interests. Storefronts are shuttered, identically faced authority figures harass residents, playing the role of cops while attached to some mega corporation. On the end of one street, a giant roulette wheel ominously spins. The borough that this game takes place in is the antithesis of the neoliberal homogeneity that Knox and Payne wrote about. Personality and culture spill out of every corner. It feels like it was built by and for the people who live there. But you also get the sense that it isn't easy. As nice as it'd be to keep making bizarre pizzas indefinitely, there are threats both obvious and surreptitious to the city's sense of self to not get taken over by faceless corporations. The look of these blocks, the illogical curves and cartoonish sense of scale and unpredictable positioning of objects, that is the story. Tales from Off-Peak City isn't great in spite of its quote-unquote bad graphics. It's great because of them. I think we are genuinely cutting ourselves off from experiences by this narrow vision of prestige gaming. I actually had a similar experience when I saw Into the Spider-Verse for the first time. I was like, animation could look like this? I've seen 4 billion movies with the same CG shininess, and we could have had stuff like this? And it's not like I wanted a movie to specifically do variable frame rate animation or any of the other things Spider-Verse does. My mind wasn't even aware of the possibility space. I had no idea what $90 million would look like when poured into a project taking as big of a swing as this. And that's one of the reasons I was so blown away by it. It's why I want to see studio flagships that look as crazy as this animation. Because indies have been doing this stuff forever. There's no shortage of creativity in the game space, but I want to see what these creators could do with the funding of a major publisher, and I want people exposed to the incredible alternative aesthetics that are out there. I want Off-Peak and Harold Halibut and Dujana and Ode to a Moon and Infini and OK Normal and Hylix and Mundan and Sable and Faith and Scanner Somber to carry the same level of visual legitimacy that Sony's current big boys have. Every city doesn't need a variation on a Guggenheim to be prestigious, but the only way to break out of that mindset is to just start doing it. Use all that processing power, all those shaders and pixels and teraflops to do something other than pores on a sad man's skin. Show us all the things we don't even know are possible because we've been so hyper-focused on one definition of good. I will always have love in my heart for an impeccably rendered, dirty, crying Norman Reedus. I am a boy who likes graphics. But what I would genuinely love is to hear that a game has good graphics and just not have any idea what that means anymore. Confuse me, blindside me, dazzle me. Show me something new. Okay, the video is almost over, but I have to tell you about this problem I have. Her name is Miel. Is she a beautiful, loving cat? Sure, yeah, of course. Does she also chew through my headphone wires with Terminator-like focus and intensity? Yeah, 4 separate times! But every destructive cat has a silver lining, and today it's this video's sponsor, Raycon. Raycon makes wireless earbuds that are really comfortable, sound awesome, and are seriously half the price of the other ones out there. I've been using the everyday E25s, and I'm honestly just finding new excuses to go out and use them because I like wearing them so much. Like, hey, why not listen to my 19th episode of Blank Check in a row? And by following the link in the description, you can get them for even less with a 15% discount. It took me a long time to jump on the wireless earbud train, but I am genuinely convinced with these things, and multiple people have told me unprompted, wow, those actually look really cool. Miel, for the record, has not told me they look cool. She mostly stares at me out of her little cat tent. Now, Raycon, I like my everyday E25s a lot. Just follow the link in the description to knock a further chunk of money off the price and go pick yourself up a pair.
Be careful, Shepard.
Edie, take these bastards!
Shift in the video games industry at the moment. And it's mostly happening because the people making video games is divided into two camps. There are giant companies that need to play it safe and make as much money as possible.
Get gruff and rough with the criminals, as Stone's Bulldog operators. Only $20. Oh God, look, it grows the funny plant. $30. Guys, it comes with a weed explosion death effect.
And then there's people who love making video games and just kind of want to make a living from it. And over the last 3 years or so, I think it's become pretty clear what people want to see more of. We've been talking about the failures of AAA and the rise of AA for a pretty long time now, but it's mostly because it's true. However, the circumstances for this are changing. And very quickly. We saw a very large exodus from a lot of different places in the last years, a lot of veteran talent going off on their own, starting their own studios, indie projects, new publishers popping up. And now we're starting to see a lot of those come out and have a lot of success, a lot of these AA projects in a situation that's very delicate. With the world in a state of economic uncertainty, people are now valuing their time and their money much higher than they have before, and they don't want to waste money and waste time on subpar products that exist exclusively to try and siphon both of those things from them. And all of these circumstances are kind of coming together at the same time that is primed to have a completely new wave of video game creators and video games take over. And look, the giant mass market blockbusters, those can still sell well. Those can even still be good games. They can even be fun, if maybe they're becoming a little stale and just a little bit too safe. But I think it's becoming clear that the winners of all of this are precisely the teams putting as much passion into what they make as possible. The ones that are guided by the simple idea of, we really want to make this game and we want it to be good, and hopefully that means it'll sell well, instead of whatever the marketing surveys and the focus groups of the boardrooms say in the big companies. The big difference now is that technology, the tools available, are really affording those smaller teams that want to bet on themselves to rival a lot of those big AAA releases. The tech is there for those teams to bring their visions to life. It seems like every other week there's some big headline of ex-Ubisoft developers form a new studio, ex-BioWare, ex-Bethesda, ex-whatever. And those are just following in the footsteps of the people who did that 3-4 years ago and are coming out with their games now. A lot of those being industry veterans that are breaking free from some of the constraints that the environment of a giant company has, environments that are so fragile and micromanaged in order to make sure that things can continue working, that the lights stay on, that nobody's afforded the freedom of taking risks. I think that for a lot of us, Baldur's Gate 3 was really the first time that we looked at an indie game, which it technically is, in a very different light. A team of people who had already put so much passion into the CRPG genre that went out of their way to get the Baldur's Gate license, and that crafted a game with so much love and passion put into it that it defied everything the industry had been saying for so long that CRPGs are dead. And from there, that sort of story has repeated and gained momentum, and it's not showing any signs of stopping. I firmly believe that the latest example of this is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. A team of 30 developers, many of them ex-Ubisoft, that decided to pursue their passion of creating a JRPG. And it's a game that feels from top to bottom like a bunch of JRPG nerds got into a room and crammed everything that they love about the genre from the last 30 years. Doesn't matter if it's Final Fantasy IX or Legend of Dragoon or Persona. Heck, Xenogears is in there somewhere. And they just mashed everything they liked about all of those games together and made it work. You can't do that if you're not doing it with passion, because on paper that sounds like a mess. And when you play the game, you're like, oh wow. But don't worry, we'll be talking more about Expedition 33 later on in this video. But I wanted to shout them out here at the start because I just think it's cool that the latest flag in this constant change is French. So, you know, Vive la Révolution! Or something like that, I don't know. The point is that these changes and what's happening surrounding them are worth talking about. We are seeing how the industry is changing for the better mostly when it comes to the types of games we get, the quality of games we get, how pro-consumer they are, and where a lot of the power of the industry resides. At a moment that coexists with Sony trying to charge us $40 for Concord and Nintendo trying to charge us $80 to $90 for Mario Kart World. At a time of uncertainty with stuff like the future price of GTA 6 and what's going to happen with the business of it all, we get to see the other side of all of this conversation as well. And so, this is what we're going to cover in this video. Number one, that there is a changing of the guard coming. There are failures of very large companies and huge successes of small ones that, if they continue on this path, won't take too long to be big themselves. Why those things are actually happening. And no, this isn't going to be a video where I just sit here and go, corporation bad, indies good, because there's more to it, and I'll try and make that interesting. Why we have more power than ever. Why that whole idea of it doesn't matter what we say. In reality, the new big thing is gonna sell anyways, and people just like eating slop is not really that true anymore, and we have the numbers. I got receipts to back that up. The third part also comes with like a mini segment of just me talking about Clair Obscur and some of the stuff that's gone on with that and Oblivion Remastered. Number 4, why, even if this goes to the best case scenario, there's always a danger that it just becomes a cycle. A cycle that has existed in many other fields for a long time in its repeating form, and what we need to look out for with that. And number 5, our role in all of this. What we can do to prevent a cycle and to keep things honest so that great games succeed and we get to play more great games. And of course, there's like timestamps down below for everything as per usual, okay? And also, by the way, hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. Now, I must say that Tia Belle d'aujourd'hui, très splendide. I think I'm not confident in French, but I think that's supposed to mean like you look great today, because you do. Remember that if at any point you enjoy this video, you think what's here is worth sharing, hit the like button, because that helps this video reach more people. It helps the channel grow and hopefully create a wonderful community that's focused on, you know, great video games. And also consider in the back of your mind somewhere that if you like this sort of stuff and what I do, think about subscribing. I'm not asking for you to do it blindly. I want to earn your subscription. I want you to be sure that what I bring to the table is worth your time. With all of that out of the way, let's get into it. Yeah, Andrew, how's it going? Look, listen, man. So Fortnite, they got Sabrina Carpenter in the game. We need something that can compete with that. We need something that the kids are into. Can we get something like, I don't know, like Imagine Dragons? Wait, what's that you said? Oh, Sven Vink is talking at the Game Awards.
On stage. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost. Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it
about brand
to
synergy?
serve as a brand. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue.
But I need revenue!
They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. And they didn't make decisions. Then you were short-sighted and function of a bonus.
What do you mean? But you need to seize the day, seize the market, feel the market. The market's inside of you.
And wanted players to have fun. And
I don't want the players to have fun. I need the players to play every day. This dude is absolutely out of his mind. This is an anomaly. So you can't speak like this as if it's gonna be working for everybody. Wait. Stuart, yeah. So yes, I heard about the Apex numbers falling. Yeah, they're losing players like crazy. How quickly can we get a hero shooter battle royale, maybe put in a little bit of extraction in it, get it out the door, try and get those players? Now, I know that I'm not crazy. I know that you felt it too. More and more bigger video games just don't feel sincere anymore. They lack a certain spark. There's a lack of creativity. There's just this sanding down of all of the edges to make sure that it's something that's going to appeal to as many people as possible. A game for everyone is a game for no one type of stuff. And that's reflected in what a lot of people play. People get more excited for remasters of 20-year-old games than they do for new ones. And I would love to say that that's just because of nostalgia, but let's be honest, it isn't. It's because it doesn't matter how many warts something from the past has, they have charm. They have a soul to them. And the good news is that there's plenty of people who either grew up playing those games or made them back in the day and want to keep making them, that want that to continue, that think that's important for games. I would actually say that most people working in games want that. And that's why, aside from stuff like remasters, a lot of indie games, smaller productions from AA studios that can afford to actually have their game sell less and just be extra happy if it sells well, are starting to do really well. Be that because it's about people really trying to put their passion into a game, be that because it's people that are just trying the craziest ideas that they can come up with, or because they're taking inspiration from things from the past and trying to bring them into the future, things that other companies have decided are not popular, are not cool anymore, that they won't sell enough for the investment, and essentially giving a large group of people exactly what they want. And as we see time and time again, that group of people is way bigger than the niche that larger companies seem to think it is. The real changing of the guard happens because we start to see more successes on one side of this argument and a lot more failures on the other, in a pretty consistent manner. Eventually, the power and the trends are going to be put in the hands of the people who sell the most, who are championed the most, who people enjoy the most. And that power dynamic seems to be shifting quite a lot very often. Now, none of this means that GTA 6 is going to do poorly. None of this means that there aren't people out there that are going to buy Mario Kart World. And as I promised in the intro, none of this is here to say big corporation bad. More often, I think it's a case of big corporation stupid or big corporation very bloated. So in what I'm sure is going to be a completely non-controversial thing to say, I think it's completely logical that these large companies actually have to sand down those games and try and maximize profits. It's kind of the nature of being a publicly traded company and reporting to your shareholders. It makes sense that they are incredibly risk averse and they don't want to put pretty much any effort into anything that even slightly has a whiff of failure. It's just that they haven't been aware for a long time of what exactly people are asking of them, what they really want. They refuse to listen to what the customers say over and over again. and they bury their heads into this hole of, well, but the latest Assassin's Creed still sold really well, and we're just gonna kind of ignore the fact that it sold less than the previous one. We're going to ignore the fact that the group of people out there that are willing to buy these video games that are simply another one of those, without really trying to break the mold or do anything new, and that feel a lot of the time like they were made by literally thousands of people, those are starting to become risky gambles. Gigantic mega projects of an unfathomable scale that, with the amount of money necessary to produce, need to have returns. You're betting big, but the tiniest mistake could cost you, well, your entire company, unless Tencent comes in to save you, I guess. And I genuinely think, and from the people I've spoken to, there's just a lot of people who love video games trying to make good games, and a lot of companies telling them, no, we should make this. And they still put in as much passion as they can. It just gets kind of lost in all of the thousands of hands. So many cooks that I don't even think it's a broth anymore. And this all stands in very stark contrast to the underdog. And I mean, everybody likes to root for an underdog. But behind the underdog story, there's actually a very interesting financial picture of success, and that's the type of stuff that shapes the industry to come. These self-funded, crowd-funded, small project to small project funded teams that slowly grow and execute on their vision, they can find success and live well, affording themselves the ability to keep chasing that dream. But if they ever hit it big, the difference between the money that they can make and how much money they spent on making the games is how AA studios are kind of born. Either little by little knowing your audience, or with a big surprise hit, suddenly things expand, and a team that previously was trying to give something more honest, a team that has something to prove, something to earn, gets to fight in the arena with the big boys. And then all of it kind of comes together. These new teams and studios of people who have left where they were, or completely new upstarts, or just a dude in a bedroom. They're hungry, they're passionate, and they're dreamers. They are incentivized to not just make a great game, but to offer it to you at a great price. Because they have nothing to lose, they don't need to sell you a game for $90 and then shove 50 different microtransactions down your throat anyways. They don't need to sell you Marathon for $40 plus the season pass plus the microtransaction. And they definitely don't need the numbers that Marathon needs to be profitable. And every day we see more of these projects crop up, and we see them find success. And I, for a while, used to work at a bank. Hence the suits. I didn't buy it just for the one sketch, okay? And this is going somewhere. Sorry for the wardrobe change. I thought it would be funny. But at the bank, everybody referred to it the same way, as the dinosaur. They used to say that it was just like a dinosaur, in the sense that it was incredibly old, that it moved incredibly slowly, and it might as well at this point be a fossil. And that's the other incredible advantage that joins together with all of that hunger, that passion, that willingness to deliver that these new teams have, that they're free from that corporate bloat. They can adapt, they can change, they can act quickly, and they can execute on their vision without compromise of all of the blue, red, and black tape that is everywhere throughout corporate structures and different teams and different decision makers and all sorts of supervision. They can commit to a vision, and when they do, we notice that in the games that they put out. We feel that when we play them, and it's that charm, that quality, that connection, that care for the player, for the customer at the end of the day, that makes us fall in love with them. Not the fact that over 4,000 people from 17 different studios helped make the assets for it. We have a lot to say in this. In the intro of this video, I talked about Claire Obscure Expedition 33. Funnily enough, kind of backed by Microsoft. Day one available on Game Pass, featured in that Xbox Developer Showcase. They're supporting this game and backing it, but then they also released Oblivion Remastered 2 days before the launch of Expedition 33, and honestly that led to one of the coolest things that I've seen within the gaming community in a hot minute. I saw tons of people out there on social media talking about, yeah, Oblivion's cool and you should play it and all that, but please don't ignore Expedition 33. And they were saying it because it is a special game. It is a small indie team that is doing something incredible, and a game that oozes passion. All of these people rallying behind it to support it, and guess what? It's been a pretty huge success for what is a small studio putting out their first game, even if there are veterans there that know what they're doing. Especially for a game that is this strange. A French JRPG with one of the most complex battle systems ever put into the genre, in a wholly original world, a brand new IP from top to bottom with interesting lore and characters and all sorts of cool stuff. And it's performing incredibly well. The future of the developers, Sandfall, at this point, is basically guaranteed. And I want to say that is huge for the industry. That is fantastic. And some people might say that it didn't matter how many people were out there pushing for Expedition 33 to be seen, how many people were making noise about it or telling others that you shouldn't miss it, but I think it definitely does. Every drop of water matters. A game that resonated with the people who played it, and the people who played it wanted others to do so. Just good old-fashioned word of mouth and people excited for something new feels so alien in this industry at this level. Sure, indie games all day, every day, and during this video I've shown you a ton of indie games as B-roll that I recommend, that are cool, that you should check out. But the ambitions of something like Sandfall are much bigger. The future of studios like Larian or Saber or Sandfall are not the same as Toby Fox. And that is where a lot of the really good news comes in, but where a lot of the danger does as well. Now, I briefly want to pause. I was fortunate enough to receive early review code for Clair Obscur. I got to play it 3 weeks early or something like that, so that I could put out my review on the embargo date. Really weird hour, but still. Unfortunately, this last week, I've had some very serious personal issues. Life can be tough sometimes, and I honestly feel like I didn't do the best job in my review. It wasn't up to my standards, and I can make excuses about, life can get complicated. But I feel really sad that a game that I honestly love so much, I don't think I did it justice in that review. So if you want to skip ahead, you can do that. But if you would, I would kind of like to make it up to the game and just let me glaze it just a little bit, because it is so important. And I do think it is tied to the general theme of this video, because we're talking about a lot of intangibles here, about how a game feels, about the passion, the care, the love, and these are things that you can't measure. This isn't the number of polygons. But I genuinely think that it's very difficult for somebody to play Clair Obscur and not feel the kind of just bright-eyed naivete that the developers have. This joy and care and stress and worry, but excitement to share something that they really wanted to make with the world. It's a very special feeling. I say this in the best way possible. It's a bunch of nerds making something really nerdy for other nerds to enjoy, which, funnily enough, I think is also a great description of Baldur's Gate 3. Again, in the best way possible. Clair Obscur is the type of game where you can listen to every song, and you can go listen to the soundtrack right now. They released it 145 tracks, and every single one is just impeccable in what it wants to communicate. That you can tell that that soundtrack was composed together with the game to make it all fit and feel unified. You can tell in its combat system every single influence that the people that worked on it had, and just how deep their love and reverence for JRPG goes. It's a game that you can tell people were really excited to make, and it plays incredibly. It very well could be my favorite JRPG combat system ever. And I'm one of those nerds. And also just a harrowing story that's very human and that hit me at a time in my life that I think was just perfect. I say this smiling, but I really shouldn't. I really can't recommend it enough. Not just because it's a sign of the times to come of these fantastic studios that are shaping the way the industry is going to move forward, but because it's just really good. And I was really proud of this comment on the review saying that these are the types of developers that deserve our money, and I agree. They do. Okay, that was me making peace with my own failures, but we gotta keep going. The cycle. Guys, do you know how to find out how heavy a red chili pepper is? All you have to do is give it away, give it away, give it away now. Please subscribe. I often get into a lot of trouble saying that I think big studios, gigantic studios should exist. These massive AAA things are really important. I think that they should be there. And a lot of this video is me digging deeper into things I've mentioned in passing in previous videos. And I mentioned that because the cycle, especially when you consider that the market really can't expand infinitely, is categorized by the failure of some companies that are slowly trending downwards or fighting to survive, as we see with stuff like Ubisoft or some of the lower results that we are seeing from Electronic Arts and things like that, will be accompanied by the rise of these newer ones. I know this is gonna sound crazy, but at one point, Ubisoft made exclusively amazing games. At one point in time, EA was a synonym of quality and not predatory microtransactions and gambling with football players. These were small companies of visionaries that saw the potential of video games, the first wave of it, and rode that wave to success and created empires. And as the empires crumble, new ones have to take their place. I don't think we're far from a world where Larian is publishing 2 games a year, which would be a pretty big publisher. And that's because they have expanded and they have more people developing more than one game. They have a publishing branch, so if they wanted to sign other studios under them, much like big publishers have done all the time, they could. And then we are at risk once again of the need to sustain everything, to keep the lights on, in how they can't take risks or they can't provide their audience with what they're asking for. Forbid them from really thinking outside of the box, from the most important decisions being made in boardrooms and not excitedly over a computer looking at potential ideas or at a bar with people spitballing ideas. None of this is based on hocus pocus. This is based on how many other industries have worked, especially from their beginning. Doesn't matter if it's like tech or cars or whatever you're into. There were probably giants at the start of it that fell, and others that were smaller took their place, and you can see it everywhere. I think I've even seen this happen in local breweries, to be honest, that just suddenly are nationwide. But that all comes with dangers to us. So let me go back to what I was saying about why I think these giant companies should exist. The huge resources, stability, raw manpower that giant studios have allows them to take on projects that nobody else could take on. It's just that they often don't pursue them or don't know how to manage what they have in order to do so. It's very difficult for other people to try and push video games forward, to try incredibly bold new ideas at their largest, unless you're one of these gigantic companies that continues to mismanage themselves. This is why I love AAA, because they represent the people that should be pushing the frontier. They're the ones that have the actual resources to push forward, and yet they don't. And so, today, as we are moving towards a new cycle, as we see the writing on the walls and the leaves in the tea, we have to hope that those that come after are going to learn the lessons of those who came before. that they won't succumb to greed, that they won't box themselves in with their investments, that they won't find themselves beholden to market trends, and instead will do everything possible to create new ones. We have to hope that when these newer studios that are coming out with just authentic bangers that resonate with people to the same degree that games resonated with me when I was 10 years old, they will accomplish the dream that you can only accomplish with the resources of success. And if they don't, we'll know very quickly because they'll put predatory microtransactions in their game along with some sort of season pass that tries to instill FOMO in the players. Please don't. Please stop. Please. Please. I'm talking directly to every single major publisher out there. Stop it. It's bad for the industry and it's not gonna get you more money, man. Stop. It's not gonna work. Sorry for the interruption. All right, we're on it. And this is where we come in. We get to dictate what succeeds. That's what we do. Even if we're not doing it intentionally, it is what the customer does. We shape the market. As we head into what seems like a recession, and more people are going to be very careful with how they spend their dwindling time and money, it's the perfect set of circumstances for the large ones to fall and the small ones to rise. People will stop investing that time and money into the super safe projects of giant corporations that are still trying to make as much money as possible, money that a lot of people no longer have, and instead are going to turn to actually fantastic projects that are charging people less than before for games that are better than before. They're going to turn to indie games that cater very specifically to what they want and therefore are 100% worth every single cent. And the only thing that we really have to do is make sure that when things go off the rails, when someone strays from the path of making the games that make us feel things, to shout, call that out, and say, stop selling me garbage skins, okay? Stop trying to siphon my time. Make something cool, dude. And so it's a pretty easy job in a lot of ways. We just have to be informed and enjoy great games, and then the market will just take shape after that. But I will say, it doesn't hurt from time to time to, make your voice heard. We are at a very delicate moment in time, economically and for our purposes here, in the video game industry. Enough voices at this point are enough to topple or really destabilize things and maybe shape them better. Enough complaints about predatory practices in live service games. And equally important, enough people championing the fantastic projects that come along does have a noticeable impact. I also take my responsibility in all of this very seriously. I am incredibly lucky that there's people out there, a lot of you, who trust me and what I have to say when I say something is bad or when I say something is good, because I do my best to really dig through stuff and bring you information that's worth listening to. And I take that responsibility very seriously in me and hopefully us doing what we can to shape video games into the future as something that is amazing and that we get to keep enjoying and be happy and hopefully also be accessible for people. That they can be things that we love outright instead of things that we love despite some of the terrible decisions that are made that harm us or that take away potential projects that could be amazing from us. Because with this second wave, this new cycle of games, comes a maturity and an evolution of them in every sense. As a medium for storytelling, as a medium for exploration of play, as a medium of just pure entertainment, as a medium of art, and yes, as products that need to be sold in order to make money, and it needs to strike a balance. And as that maturity comes in and the balance is struck, we will be here to enjoy it. Video game industry is experiencing its biggest transformation ever. Right now, we're living it. And with as much doom and gloom as we can see every single day out there, I'm saying buckle up, smile, and enjoy the ride. Because video games, pretty freaking awesome. And they're not going anywhere. Ubisoft can release as many new NFT games. They just released a new Might and Magic NFT game. Good job, Ubisoft. You will not take good games from us over my dead body. Because we will keep fighting for great games and enjoying them. I've been Mug. If you enjoyed this look into the state of the industry at the moment, I hope it was entertaining. Hit the like button. Matters a ton. If I did manage to earn your subscription throughout this video and you're interested in my news, reviews, previews, essays, just like this one, and long-form retrospective, subscribe. All I can say is that all of it matters a ton, and I take it very seriously. As a duty to fight for great games and enjoy them and spread that love and talk about cool stuff. A very extra special thanks to the members of The Wall, be that members or patrons. These are the people who go above and beyond to directly support this and help offer me stability and freedom and potentially turning YouTube into a job, which is wild, but also really awesome. I thank all of you so much, and if you're interested in supporting yourself, links are in the description below, and as always, go out there, enjoy some great video games, and I will see you again very soon.